Okay, good evening. It's November 23rd, 2015. We're meeting tonight. We've got an agenda. We've got a pretty full agenda. We'll try to go until 9:30 and get everyone out of here. We have the first item we have on our agenda tonight is to discuss staff feedback. Since we last met with the Banwell team, they have also met with the elementary school staff and gotten feedback on the building and program needs down there. So that completes their interviews at both schools, and they put together for us, it's in the materials, it's the colored charts, programs for each school based on the staff feedback and based on Dr. Joyce's recently finalized study. So with that, I'll hand it over to Ingrid to discuss those.
Okay. Hopefully I won't bore you guys to death with this, but it's a lot of information, and it's still in draft form. So Sean, we're still gonna have to go through this with a fine-tooth comb and really distinguish what is a need and what is a wish.
Sure.
But this gives us a good framework for at least starting this task. So as we have them organized, we have general classrooms in the above, the purple, specialized classrooms, special services classrooms, the core areas, and educational support, and then facilities support. So they're just general categories. And we have the space standards in this first column here from the New Hampshire Department of Education. Then we have existing space areas, so we can keep track of how much is in your school now versus how much we're going to have. The number of existing spaces you have in terms of classrooms, the number. Then existing area, proposed area space, number of proposed spaces for a total proposed area. So I don't know, do you want to literally go down through this list tonight?
I think I'd rather have a little more time to comb through it to see if we
Right.
catched or missed anything.
Right.
And then refine it from there, perhaps.
We've tried to put any comments and notes in this column here on the
Yep,
right.
on the side. Yep.
So, big picture, if you turn to the back, basically, the existing area is around 59,416 square feet, plus or minus.
Yep.
So, in reading through Mark Joyce's report, as well as meeting with all your faculty and staff, and assuming a 0.35 net to gross square footage,
Right.
so that means we need to do all the corridors, the bathrooms, the mechanical rooms, all that.
Okay.
We need about 81,000 square feet of space, so just over 21,000 square feet of new space.
Okay.
And this includes bringing the sixth grade down. So we had to start somewhere, so for
Sure.
this one, we just started with that assumption. We may not bring sixth grade down, but this starts there.
Great.
Okay. Just for public consumption, on the right-hand column, I guess it's in the comments column, this sort of explains, and again, this is what you need to, or we need to work on wants versus needs, refining that column, essentially. Okay. But that's where we see where additional space may be needed. For instance, in the core spaces, it talks about, addition to the cafeteria and additional gym space. So just so people can see that. These documents are up on the website as well for people to review, so.
Okay?
All right, so I guess, Sean, you'll look over this a little bit. Maybe in a coming meeting, we can sort of
Yeah, I'll
narrow it down.
can shoot you with any, should I
Yeah,
shoot you with any corrections or anything that we?
sure.
Okay.
That would be great.
Separate the wants from the desires.
Right, right.
They did these interviews and that with sort of the floor plan.
Correct.
Created this?
As well as Mark Joyce's report.
Gotcha. And then the last page that you were saying, I just want to make sure I understand. The existing space is 59,416,
Correct.
or with mechanical 65, and the proposal, well, not the proposal, the needs analysis said 81.
Correct.
Bringing sixth down.
Right.
Oh, okay.
That's, yep.
Ingrid, can I ask what percentage of the proposed space is sixth? Do we
It's-
know, is that,
It's relatively,
1,700
Current, that would be,
square feet. grade,
2,700 square feet.
Yeah, so,
Yeah.
so not a lot.
And if sixth didn't come down, is there, in other words, if you just looked at keeping it as is, what would that do to the
front
space
page.
requirements? Does
Basic-
that take most of the 21,000 away?
No,
Okay.
it does
Because I
not.
still know you need a gym,
Correct. Yeah.
but
So it takes it from like instead of doing a 20,000 square foot addition to a 10,000 square foot addition.
okay.
Yeah, big picture.
Because I'm not sure we got to that decision yet to move six, though that was the possibility, one of the possibilities. right?
That was something that was put out there, yes.
So 10,000 from 20,000.
Don't hold us to that number exact, but
But in that
big
neighborhood.
picture.
Yeah, that'd actually be good that maybe on, once, Sean, you're done, so we're not chasing our tail. Once you're done with your review, that we could answer Russ's question on that square footage difference.
Sure.
Be nice to know, so.
Some of that's driven by, if you were gonna have more students, everything kinda the core spaces get a little bigger. And do you offer some more support services? And
Right.
is there more
Yep.
special ed, foreign language, all that goes
Sure.
along with it?
But there's parity, right? Because if you're adding on to the elementary building, then that means that those needs are actually, you're taking, there should be some parity between the junior high, senior high building, so it's
Right.
a bit of a wash.
Yeah, if you build
Right.
more at the elementary, you build less at the high school.
So is that in the high school, which we haven't gone through yet, you're saying that
Took
doesn't
out.
include sixth
Correct.
and this and that?
Right.
It just may be useful to put one together the
Yep.
way it is, just so we have.
We wanted to start somewhere, have it refined by the principals, and then we can modify.
Great.
Ingrid, I have just a quick question. Let's look at first grade, the existing space area, they have like 859 square feet. And it's recommended that you have 900 square feet.
Correct.
So my thing is, you look at all these, now you're saying you need 29,000 square feet, where really, those existing buildings or classrooms, you can move those down, correct?
Can.
And is that the theory? And,
You can, yeah.
because, I mean, if you can look at these two ways. It
You
just, somewhere off like 50 square feet.
And we'll, most likely, most renovations, you ask for a few variances, but you can't ask for 90% of the classrooms to be subpar. You know, you have to kind of make some improvements to get to that state standard. Even though there's no state funding, they still are requiring you to do that, because at some point there will be, and they want to make spaces that meet the minimum state standards.
Ingrid, can I just clarify sixth grade? We said 2,700 square feet, but it should really be 3,900 square feet, because you have that dedicated lab.
Correct?
So it's really 3,900 square feet for dedicated for sixth grade, not,
But there's probably a lab down in the,
Specialized spaces,
right.
science lab.
for the science lab? Yeah, that science lab, I was thinking
Yeah,
that's
oh, it's
dedicated for
1,200.
sixth grade.
Right.
Oh, right.
Right?
Yep,
Yeah,
exactly.
thank you.
So that's taken care of with the science lab?
Yeah,
So you have 2,700 plus 1,200 plus, yeah, we can pull those pieces out.
and again, that can change based on philosophy. If you stay elementary, you don't need science.
Right.
You can go to a classroom of 900 square
900,
feet, cut it down.
I'm sorry, wait, just so I can follow, were you seeing the 1,200?
Right here.
Let's call it.
Okay, I
See,
got it.
there's 0.
Okay.
The bottom of the green headline,
Yep, and you can see too, in a lot of the other areas where we have 0, for instance, like sensory, there is no room for that, but we need a sensory room. So that's a new room. Conference for the testing room, 0, we've added that.
So in the floor plans, we're in just big boxes right now, just conceptual space.
Right.
What we should really do too is, once we refine this, add another column with add or deduct, so you can pick out what's changed.
minor thing, but I think you have the specialized classroom subtotal. I think you use the same words for the sped classrooms as well, and you just may want to, I think you have specialized classroom subtotal twice in 2 different areas, and you may want to just do special sped or something. Do you see what I'm, In the dark green,
Oh, yeah,
you have a,
special services classroom,
Yep.
subtotal. Okay.
looks great.
Sean, at some point, will you go through here and kind of pick out I mean, because this is kind of a bird's eye view, which is
Right.
very helpful.
Yep.
But it would be good to have a bird's eye view that said these are, which you consider essentials.
Right, yeah, and I think part of it is we need to make that decision what we're gonna be doing with the sixth grade. Because that's gonna play a big factor in, because if you brought them down, are you gonna keep the same middle school program, or are you gonna be shifting back to more of an elementary-based program for sixth graders? Because that factors into whether you're gonna have to do the foreign language, rooms for foreign language, or that sort of thing, so. But based on that, I can kind of weed through and say, yeah, this would be great, but these are what would be essential. This would be great if we could have them, and this would be super great if we could have them, or something on that lines.
So Sean and Chris, what factors into the decision of whether, if you were to bring sixth grade down, how you structure it academically? Is it just a choice of philosophies, or, we're doing a middle school approach now, and I take it we think that's best.
Right.
If you brought it down, could you still do that?
You could, it's a little bit more
You could.
difficult.
At some level, you could. I don't think you could replicate it, what you're gonna have in the current spot.
For the layperson, how might, in particular, that change or be challenging?
Well, I think a lot of times when you have a middle school philosophy, and I'm not sure, I'm not up in Chris's building a lot to see how the middle school runs, but I know that you have a lot of opportunities for the kids to be doing teaming things together. There might be where they are moving have the ability to sit in a seventh grade class if they're advanced in mathematics or something on that lines. Those would be some things that you would want to take a look at. Again, and then it gets into the whole idea of what you're gonna offer your sixth graders there. I mean, a lot of middle schools offer foreign language in sixth grade. There's a lot that don't. We currently do. Is that something that we want to continue in practice? If that's something we want to continue in practice, rather down there, we'll need to build the space for it.
Right.
So does that mean, so when we're talking about different kind of approaches, we're talking about, like, the current model now is red, black, and the students are changing classrooms, and they're going from math to English, to language arts, and then into French one quarter or something like that.
Yep.
But with a more elementary school model, they would be more like the fifth grade is, which is they stay in, they have a home base and a special that they.
Yeah. And then what I've seen is that they'll start breaking up and they might switch 2 classrooms for math and science, and those teachers share those kids, so you get a transition of those kids at a sixth grade level.
Right.
But again, it's philosophy how you want it to go, because the certification is fine, K-6. There's no certification issues. Now
Right.
you're not content specific, so you can shift them down there elementary wise.
To your point, Mike, did we make a conscious decision to say 6 was middle school and we want them in the other program, or did we make a premises decision that said, we can't fit the sixth grade here, let's move them to this building, okay, now that they're in the building, let's change the program? I get the sense it's more of a premises issue than it was let's define a middle school with sixth grade in it.
Right.
Okay.
I think it gives us a series of
Yeah.
options that you can look at to see, one, what is educationally sound, and what is educationally sound for the best for your dollar, too, as well.
Way down the road, but I'm sort of looking at this like Dan's point that says, gee, you may need 50 feet more in this classroom, okay? And so you may be able to get a variance for that. There's other of these, I'm sure, that, maybe if you change one wall, you could reposition. And then there's ones in here that are gonna be a doozy that say, in order to get this done, this is where it's gonna really cost. Is there any way to think in terms of identifying the easy fixes versus the tough, or the, hold on, this is where you trip into a new addition, or putting a...
Yeah, when we develop kind of the next, say like for the next meeting, when we kind of jump into starting to develop the floor plans, we can easily show, this is a problem. This is say a structural wall that if we move it, it's gonna cost you, it's not worth moving this. And we'll identify all those elements as we go through the program, so that we can talk about it and say, this is, if it really needs to happen, it can, but that comes with a dollar value.
Right.
So just to add on to Russ's point, this is again in part for public consumption, but what originally got us into this discussion was when we were talking about, you know, advantages and disadvantages of different sites. I brought up the notion of potentially to alleviate space problems down at the elementary school to bring the 5th grade up. And then Chris and Sean had, you know, informed us the pros and cons of doing that. So that's where it came in. So it was, at least from my perspective, sort of a space needs thing. And, you know, so now in one of these drawings, we're talking about seeing the 6th grade come down. At the end of all of this, we're gonna have a list of pros and cons, you know? And we've been living with the 6th grade at the middle school level for years. I went to an elementary school that, you know, had 6th grade in it. There's both, you know? There's, I think, Ann, your school is what, 5th through?
4 through 8.
4 through 8. So,
It sure is, but it works.
so at the end of the day, I mean, just this, again, we haven't committed to anything. We're not, this isn't about educational philosophy, you know, we're not deciding that. I'm not an expert on that. You're the experts on that. Ann's the expert on that. So this is just sort of identifying space needs, and then we're gonna come at the end of the day with a list of pros and cons, and ultimately, we need to look out for the best needs educationally. But there's maybe some that are in a choice area, you know, that we might live with certain arrangements, and so that's that. One other point on the elementary school, and I'll credit Al Zink for it. Apparently, he went over there. He was inspecting the utilities, HVAC, I guess, recently, and discovered a mezzanine level that has, as he described it, 2 or 3 rooms. I haven't seen it. Apparently, it's above the gym. But I suggest that, Sean, maybe you can describe it a little better.
Yeah, it is like a mezzanine level that goes up. It has all the mechanical systems for HVAC and that sort of thing up there right now. It's, I don't know how many square feet, but it's almost like a couple lanes of a bowling alley. You pick like 4 or 5 lanes of a bowling alley, put them together. Big, long, it's open space. It has one stairwell that goes up to it that is from the back of the storage area in the gym. I question whether that stairwell is actually compliant with code, but that's just my thought. But, so it's a windowless area. It has only one means of egress. You have ways out onto the roof, basically. There's some storage up there. Like I said, the HVAC systems are up there, so that takes up a lot of the space in there. Structurally, I don't know if you can put a second set of classes up there or not.
And I have no idea.
Yep.
I guess the point is that, I guess I wasn't really aware of that space. I've never been up there. But it may have a use, whether it's storage or something else. Al's other comment when he was there with the HVAC company, I think it was Palmer and Sicard, they mentioned to them, if you wanted to, you could move those HVAC
Right.
units outdoors,
Right,
you know?
You can move them, you may even be able to move them up on the roof and clear the space out.
Right.
Without
So-
having much relocation work.
So we'll try to set up, you know, maybe before one of our meetings, to take a quick peek up there and see if it works in any solutions
Are
here.
you guys aware of that in the square footage calculations? or-
Yeah, we did. We looked at it in terms of, could you use this as classroom space or school use space? Proportionally, it doesn't work quite well for classrooms, just because the way it would be broken up. Proportionally, it would be kind of an odd-shaped classroom. You'd have to add another stairway, and you'd have to add an elevator. Plus, you'd have to move those mechanical units, and a lot of times, those mechanical units that are in there were purchased and installed for interior use. To put them outside would be a large cost, and then some units would have to be rebought, so.
But if you said things like, I know every page has 2 or 3 storage, I need storage things, or another one says we need a meeting room or a team room or something like that, where I don't know if you can look at the space and say, either for storage, or we can make 2 conference rooms up here so they can't see the outside, but at least teams can get together and work. That may be useful space in some degree.
Essentially, any public use space needs to be equal opportunity for anybody, so
Gotcha.
it would be,
So
we can
that-
use it for storage.
So you would need the elevator.
Yeah.
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 So, but just something that, we ought to track down and,
Should look at it.
yep. All right, any other questions on the,
So I've just gotten a list, and I'll add up the sixth grade pieces and give that to you before we leave tonight.
okay.
So the other chart is, we did the same thing for the high school, so Chris, if you could take your magnifying glass out. Or we could send you an Excel spreadsheet.
That's fine.
And again, the sixth grade, you'll see in this is 0, because we've assumed for this exercise, they've gone to the elementary school. We organized it in the same way, general classrooms. And again, looked at the Mark Joyce report to add in the pieces that we thought we should. So big picture with this one, total existing space is just under 80,000 square feet. And the proposed, we're at 105,000 square feet.
That's about what the JEC report said. I think it was 104.
104.
Something, yeah.
And that doesn't include the sixth grade then?
Correct, right.
Or any expanded multi-use space,
Like,
like an auditorium,
I see.
larger auditorium.
Now, the JAC didn't talk about moving a class though, did it? So when you're
No.
saying the space needs are similar,
This also, there were quite a few adds, if you will. Like, for instance, the Spanish room, we added a classroom for the Spanish room. I'm sure before the other committee added all of the science rooms, but there were special ed areas that weren't included when we met with them.
which makes sense if you're adding additional things in and that sort of offset.
The music, I think they wanted 3 music classrooms, chorus, band, and a classroom for music. And both chorus and band had to be for 80-piece bands and 80 person chorus, so those were bigger probably than your previous report. OTPT, you don't even have a space right now for that, so 800 square feet for that. Reading specialist. Life skills.
There are several places where it doesn't list a state standard, but I can't imagine that there isn't a state standard.
Yeah,
for
this is
some of these
just
things.
the form to continue modifying this, so we're gonna fill those in. We just didn't have time to populate it.
Yeah, I thought for sure there's gotta be
Yes.
state standards about how many restrooms and.
Right. So in the end, I mean, these 2 documents will form our foundation of whatever solution is brought to the public. So it's important to really scrutinize and get these right from the get-go, because we'll use these.
exactly. And so, just looking ahead, we're gonna have another meeting on just the Facilities Committee only on December 6th.
6th or 2nd?
Sorry, 2nd, misspoke, 2nd. It's a, what, is that a
Wednesday.
Wednesday. And what we might do is just take we only got these on Thursday, so that's a lot to digest and think about. So maybe, as an agenda item for that meeting, let's take another look at these ourselves, talk about them, make sure we're comfortable, because this is it. This is the foundation. If we're not comfortable with this, then, we kind of tough to talk about narrowing down the proposals, so.
Though I mean this to be humorous, in reading through this, it seemed that there was a course in bladder control in the elementary school for everybody, because nobody was near a bathroom that they could use, or they had to change buildings, or...
There's only 2 facilities for teachers in that building, in our building.
And that lesson continues at the high school, junior,
Yeah,
senior
same
high.
high
It's
Right.
arguably worse. So,
Since we brought up restrooms, have we really gone over this to make sure there is enough restrooms? And my question is,
right.
at one point, wasn't it mentioned to have a middle school designated restrooms?
Yes, they did ask for that, so they didn't have to cross into the high school. So,
More important issue as you age, is knowing where the bathroom is and how far away.
so some of these, we do have toilets at the end. And you can see we don't have, there's some that's in the existing, says not existing, but we have them. Obviously, we have to make, or meet the code or surpass the code, but we're meeting the code with this program now.
So, I mean, just anecdotally, I heard this week, and this is something we have to keep in mind in general, because it relates. I heard a story of gym classes at the high school. The middle school girls were, changing and getting ready for gym this last week, and a high school girl told them to shut up or keep quiet. They're right there together, changing. So, I mean, these tight spaces aren't optimal all the time. Now, the staff took care of it. That thing happens in life, but these are things I think we need to be sensitive to as we're planning in terms of the overlap. They're just different ages, and the bathroom thing is a big deal. I don't, I'm remembering 25 years ago when I was in high school, it was a big deal. We didn't have any of that, crossover. Right. So.
Yeah, you have 11-year-old girls with 17-year-old girls.
And this is, and I'll entertain the committee on this point, but, and I'm serious about it. I'd like to spend a class day over there myself, just as much as we can, just go around and actually experience it. Because I got more out of those, out of actually seeing the schools, but to actually see how it functions on a daily basis. The bell rings, am I running into people in the hall when they're opening their lockers? Do I have enough time to get down to my class?
Right.
Just the,
You've mentioned that before. I think it's a really important thing to do.
yeah,
You should do it
Take
on
that time.
crutches. Oh.
yeah. Do it on crutches,
Do it on
too.
crutches, just.
Yeah.
An elevator now, so,
Oh, do you?
so you couldn't do it on crutches now.
Maybe I'll talk to Chris and Sean about maybe scheduling that. If it's not a whole day, maybe it's just for a few periods, just so we go have lunch in the cafeteria,
Right.
Especially at the elementary school. We'll have, you gotta eat in 5 minutes and get out, and
Let's see,
so.
6 different lunch periods or something.
That's right,
There you
6
go.
periods.
Correctly.
Yep.
So I think that might be worthwhile.
It's
Before we
either
get too far.
15 minutes or lunch starts at 9:30 in the morning.
Basically.
Both.
Quarter of 10, quarter of 11.
Any other questions on or comments on the?
If we're gonna think about this more over the next week or so, how would you propose us sort of reading through this in a way that gets the most value out of it for you?
You really have to dig in early in the morning,
Okay.
after your coffee, and just go through it line by line by line.
Compare, I would think compare it up with Dr. Joyce's report, because
Right.
he covers all this stuff and adds more narrative to it.
He does.
But you still are not being able to say what floor or what location this is. So
We don't
when you-
need to.
When you're grouping it this way, you may have 3 classrooms that are, opposite ends. That
Right.
all would be considered science, so we see it as 3 science rooms here and,
This is just a list.
right.
We take this list and then we translate it to the building. So it's really just train yourself on just reviewing the lists. And the biggest thing to scrutinize, I think, is where you go from 0, because you don't have that space, to whatever that is, and really make sure that you need all of those spaces. And the staff was pretty good. I mean, they weren't on a mission of, this is the only time in 30 years we're gonna try to get something, so let's put it all in there. They were pretty rational and
If I can give you an example, Russ, what I went to is on the first page of the high school.
Right.
You go down and you look at the 9, 12 math classes. So I'm going, okay, yeah, we got a math class there, we have a math class there, and then, there's 2 more additional. I'm going, okay. And I'm thinking about the number of math classes we offer plus students, and that's where you get the report for why an extra math classroom that we don't have now. But you can see in there, it's a combination. We do a lot of scheduling different classrooms in different content areas.
Right.
So that one was, to me, was like, do we need that extra classroom? And as I'm walking through my building, looking at the number of kids and trying to figure out the sections of math, that's accurate. That's what I'm looking at. There's some that's non-negotiable. You need 4 sixth grade classrooms, you need 4 seventh grade classrooms. So you can't even scrutinize over that. It's those extra classrooms that I think you need to look at a little bit greater depth.
Gotcha.
And it's not like you can just take the Mark Joyce report and turn that into this. You have to take his report, you have to take our meeting notes from meeting with all the staff, and then I think the next step is having the principals scrutinize this and really come back to get a final.
And hopefully the principals can attend with us next Wednesday, if your schedules allow.
Chris, on the first sheet you mentioned, which one is a physics lab? Is that on the first sheet? Is it designated there?
We don't have a designated physics lab.
I'm just saying, but there should be.
Yep, so we combo that a lot with the other two science labs. The 9th grade science lab and the 10th grade science lab is where we combo physics out of right now. So we don't even see that on here.
So,
So that might be the one that you've got as non-existing.
right, exactly.
Okay.
That-
The
down
one at the
end
very
there.
bottom.
So that would be your creation of a
Okay,
physics
okay,
lab,
that's
because we
what
don't
I
have it
think
right
of
now.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, in terms of the Perkins space, it says, so what happens, what's in this plan, I'm not quite clear from looking at this, what's happening to that? Is that a building that, is it demoed? Because there are several things that are relocated.
In our plans, and again, this is separate, this is just a listing of the requirements, if you will. Our plans, I think, call for that Perkins building to be demolished and for all of the educational space to be under the same roof.
Talk just for a minute why the demo, is it because of just the facility is not adequate or it's antiquated?
What
or
else would you use it for? I mean, I understand you're under space constraints now, so it makes sense to utilize that, but you need the parking, if we're gonna have some sort of community, a multi-purpose building over there for the fields, you know, what's the best purpose? And I really think it's best to have all your educational, spaces under that same roof.
And then along the same lines, in terms of a community performance space, where is, I looked at the very last page. Where is that?
We've included the, music in this. I don't believe we have included,
We didn't include a large.
yeah, because
Type of
again,
performing space.
that hasn't been programmed, so that would be, if that is an option that we choose, then we need to program it with the high school and the music, all the, athletics, so we don't have that in here yet.
So if that comes in here, that modifies both the elementary school and the junior, senior high school space, so.
How would it modify it could,
The elementary.
yeah, how would it modify the elementary?
Well, maybe not, but for performance space? Weren't we talking for a while about kind of a dual-use gym or something along those lines? With, some kind of attachment for a stage or
Right.
something like that. But that wouldn't be necessary if there was a performance.
At the
designated-
elementary?
No,
Or-
across the street.
Oh, right, yeah.
Oh, so would a performance space be needed at the elementary if you had it across it? I guess that's yeah,
Right, well, I'm just trying to,
Yeah.
if we're adding space here, does it need to be added if we added space
Right.
over there? So that there's
Sure.
a cool and a
Right.
shared
Good question.
and dual-use space, so then
Yeah.
you kind of,
yeah. I don't, Sean, how would that practically work, though? It's presuming you could have a performance space on Carpenter. I mean, getting kids back and forth and snow and ice and rain and night and.
Yeah, those are all factors that you'd have to
Yeah.
put into it, but I would see if we had 4, large chorus performance or something on that lines, then you would definitely, but we've started to use the high school gym just this year. So for things where you can have a lot of the community, I think you'd automatically default up to there. I think if you had something where you could have a space where you could gather the kids, and if this plan went through, you would have a larger cafeteria, perhaps you'd be able to accommodate most of your kids in the cafeteria with a small sort
the
of
rehearsal
presentation.
classroom versus performance.
Correct.
Well, it would strike me as that would, you may say the high school kids, can cross the street and move in that direction, but where the elementary kids would be, I would think it would be much more occasional use
Right.
because you're both far away, you got younger kids, you're traveling across a road. So that would be additive in any case.
It would be
So
added.
if we're talking additional ball fields, or we're talking a public space, that's not contained in either of
Not
these.
currently, but, I mean, you guys can tell us if we should as part of it.
Maybe just another page for things that have been discussed that we haven't included?
Sure.
Yeah, right now, this is really the down and dirty, smallest footprint, just keep it really, really simple. Yeah. So.
Right,
just-
but if that starts adding, significant costs or large spaces.
So this is also good to keep us on track, so we don't.
Oh, no,
we
this
don't
is
get-
great.
We don't get off hand.
So, just in terms of, plan of attack here, I'm just, from the principal's point of view, Chris and Sean, I don't know how much time you might need to go over these and sort of get comfortable with them, but I don't wanna rush it. You should have enough
I
time.
think we can be ready by Wednesday.
Yeah,
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
And then maybe, you can connect with Ingrid, and she can, revise these, and we can, see a revised draft and really dig into it, for the next meeting.
Yeah, because I'd rather spend time after you guys have done your thing with Ingrid than investing the time and you guys coming back and saying, well, here are 12 pieces that we moved around the sheet.
Right.
And let us know too, realistically, if that's doable by next Wednesday, because I know we have a holiday coming up. If it's not, let's, I don't want people to,
Halftime, football halftime.
so. If you can do it, that's great. If you need some more time, by all means, let us know. Sure. All right. So, next up on the agenda, Chris is gonna, he's given us a handout here, and he's gonna, talk about this issue that's identified in the JEC report, this phenomena whereby, students, beginning in around 2006, our student population started to fall off, I guess, after elementary school. And that's one of the, I guess, what's his name? Who wrote the JEC report?
Dr. Joyce?
Nope.
Randy Bell?
Randy Bell, there you go.
Yeah.
Dr. Bell pointed that out. He called it the strange phenomenon, but it was one of his 15 or so items that he thought we ought to look at, because it's a difference between it's about 150 plus students potentially. So I'll let Chris talk about.
Yeah, so you can, I'll just go through, you get the grade, the gender, obviously where they're moving to, reason that they moved, and the school year that it happened. So we've got the most current school year, and it goes back to the 2009-2010 school year. And, for the most part, you'll see when we get to private schools, St. Thomas, Berwick Academy being the two biggest private schools that we lose kids to. Now, St. Thomas, we usually lose those students in 9th grade. Berwick, we lose them usually in 6th grade. So you'll see that throughout the report. A couple other things to note in there. You'll see GBEX. That's Great Bay E-Charter School, which is in Exeter, and we provide transportation because we run buses through there. So you've seen many more students go to GBEX. It's a charter school, as charter education has been really more prevalent in the last couple of years. You can see the numbers are up at GBEX, and it's a different type of format for education that works for students. It's not the traditional type of education that we do in most of our high schools. It's a lot more project-based. It's a lot more at your own skill, and these are good fits for kids.
Is that being funded less in Exeter these days? Did I read stuff like that? Or
I believe there is, but I'm not exactly sure how much less it is because of what comes in through New Hampshire and what doesn't, and what we have to fund, for district-wide for
I
it.
thought there was a little financial discussion going on.
There
about
is,
that.
absolutely.
Okay.
So one of the questions was, are we losing a lot of kids to homeschooling? And you look in this report, and there is not a lot of kids that we're losing to homeschooling. You lose kids to private schools, and again, 9th grade and 6th grade being the most prominent. Our charter schools, because you'll see Cochico Charter School in there, you'll see a charter school in Hampton. But you also see some, kids that are foreign exchange students, so we have to count for them moving in and out, so they're part of your numbers, because they're housed in our building, and then they move out because they don't finish with us. Any kid that takes their GED, they're not considered a Newmarket graduate, so they're considered moved out, so those numbers go too. One good thing is the GED program doesn't count as a dropout anymore. so it counts as a completer, so you've got kids finishing a program. And a couple other things you'll see in there, Hershey Milton. That's a program that we've worked with in Hershey, Pennsylvania, where we're able to get kids that are, really struggling financially, but are good academic students. And we get about one a year now, where we're able to tuition to Hershey Milton Academy to help them out with, they live there year-round. So again, there's not a lot in here saying people are moving out because of Newmarket. They're moving out, and you can see the different locations. Some of the anecdotal, in the last 10 years, how many schools in the Seacoast area have had some type of renovation or new school go up? You can count just about every surrounding community around us. But there's nothing saying, I'm moving out of Newmarket because the education is terrible. Parents are moving, and all over, the state of New Hampshire and New England for that matter.
Chris, I have a question. Now, you don't have the elementary school in these figures, do you?
No, I do not.
Yeah, because and I
There
know,
are stats at the
I'm just-
elementary school that are the
yeah.
same, though, I believe.
but according to Randy Bell's report, there are 41 students that are homeschooled. And that seems like quite a bit.
Yep.
And if you look from 2002 to 2014, the national average has increased 30%.
Yep.
Do you see that?
We're actually seeing more
I think-
homeschool kids coming in to take specialty classes in our school. Chemistry, PE,
So, like,
music, world languages.
Sports?
Yep, they're open to sports as well.
So at what point are they considered homeschooled and not? It's
They're-
almost like a hybrid?
Yeah, a lot of, we're seeing a lot more hybrids in our, but they're considered a homeschool kid because they're not graduating with a Newmarket diploma. They're just getting classes to supplement their education.
And I don't know, Sean, it strikes me as that decision and that transition over the past few years is that you wouldn't necessarily do that as the first thing for someone who's already in the high school. You would tend to think about making the homeschooling decision much earlier in the curve, somewhere in either.
Typically, you see it
elementary
in elementary school.
school. So that if we
Start.
did, and I don't know if it's, I know you keep the same stats and stuff.
I can get that.
It may be useful for elementary school. The only other question I had is my first thing in sitting here with another sheet of paper and going, let me put down the 5 categories and tick marks for how many went
Sure.
in each. So if there's a way someone with
Yep, we can do that.
intelligence and knowledge can
Yep, I'll
give
get
us
that
a
for you for
summary.
Wednesday. We can do that.
Great.
So this tells us where they went and when and who went. It doesn't tell us so much why.
Correct.
How might we get to that why question? Because the whole reason, I think Randy noticed it, and what's piqued my interest about it is just in facilities planning. It seems sort of an acute drop-off after 2006, and sort of, let me put it this way, if the facility situation is changed and improved, might we expect an increased population? In other words, did some students leave because of that? Do we know? How would we figure that out?
When we do exit interviews with all parents and
Yep.
students when they leave, and no one has flat out come and said, you've got a terrible building, that's why we're moving out of here.
Okay.
Some of it is just, proximity to their work. Some of it is, I'm gonna go to a brand-new school. When Exeter was built,
Yep.
we saw a lot of kids move to that district, so that's Stratham, that's Kings,
It was about
Kensington.
that time, too, wasn't it?
Yeah, that
2006?
2004, I think is when the Exeter building was built. Yeah. So you saw that, and that's when you saw, upgrades to Portsmouth, you saw upgrades to Sanborn was new 3 years after that. Epping's brand new in the last 5 years with their middle school. So you do have some of that, you can see where they've gone and during those timeframes.
So if they were to go to Exeter, I know you can pay to go there, and you can live here, right? But most of those people would have moved into the district?
Yeah, to pay to go to Exeter, it's like 16 grand,
Right,
so
That's fine.
it would be a move.
Yeah. Okay.
And can I ask about the grade? Is this incoming grade? So
It's
this
the
is-
grade that they were currently.
That they were
so they-
currently,
yep.
so the 6th graders were 6th graders
Yep,
at,
because they finished 5th grade and before they enrolled with us.
okay, so this is before this is entering 6th grade.
Correct.
So, do you have, I kind of, the data cruncher in me wants to look at this in terms of trends, because just in the first, 15, 16, if you look at that, there are more, when you just do the numbers just for that one, of course, it's just one, an N of one, there are more, we lose more going into sixth grade than any other grade. For that, in that particular, from 15, 16. Do you know if that, have you looked at that trend as to whether?
No, I have not looked at that trend to see if that's the, I know,
I mean, it's only,
I know we lose them at Berwick in sixth grade is when we lose the kids that go to Berwick. I know that for a fact. And then ninth grade is St. Thomas or usually
Yeah.
PCA.
well, it looks like, at least from just looking at it, it looks like we're losing them entering sixth and entering ninth.
Correct.
Right.
We do. The transition years is when we lose them.
How does this balance off with incoming students, new incoming students?
Right, I mean, we're pretty much the same, I can get that report, it's a whole different report. So obviously, if you count up and, first 25 kids, we lost 25 kids, no, but we got about 28 in, so we were up a little bit. And then you gotta also remember that, we have the big influx, so we graduated 50 and brought in 96, so we were already up 46.
But I guess the overall trend for the last 5, 10 years, what
Yeah.
would you say is the balance as far as outgoing versus?
Yeah, I mean, it's 2 or 3, 4, 5, I mean,
Pretty close,
it depends, yeah, some years you're even, you're up 3, it's not a huge, you're down 15, it's not in the double digits, but I can grab that. That will take a little bit longer, but we can look at that as well.
I'm gonna
Well,
ask,
if there's a way that you can make sense out of it, rather than just raw data pieces. But it sounds like, I mean, I look at this and like you had a quick observation. My first one was, there seem to be a lot of people who move within New Hampshire. And then I said, that would strike me as unusual, except after living 12 or 13 years in New Hampshire. There are a lot of people who've never gone outside New Hampshire or Maine and think Boston is the end of the world. So that doesn't surprise me, though it would normally, you're moving 2 or 3 towns over, would not be my reason to move mentally, in the states that I lived in, New York and Connecticut and stuff like that. But here, repositioning either into moving to Exeter or something like that, or it seems to be a lot more popular sport. I guess I just think people would move to another state, where it looks like 50% of these people just move to the next town over or two.
Yeah, and a lot of that can be renting. There are renters that are moving, so you lose them because they're renting. The bigger ones, when they're moving to Florida, that's usually a job transfer down
Well, you're
south.
right, I hadn't even thought of rental yet.
So that is very common, the Epping Newmarket line, that's a lot of renting. They're leaving here and going to Epping because they find something cheaper, but that is, again, that's anecdotal, but we can look at it.
I just want to put up the Randy Bell report for non-public, for independent and parochial schools. It's 20 students left the school system, K through 5. 6 through 8, it was 10 students. 9 through 12, it was 23 students. So
What's the period of time that you're looking at there?
this is, let's see, the period of time. I don't have the period of time, but I would say this was as of, it was written.
Well, if you listen to that, and if you think about that from a real estate perspective, what you hear in the real estate business, what we've always heard, as far back as I can remember, move to Newmarket, get yourself an affordable home. The elementary school is fine. As soon as your kids get ready for high school, time to move. Because the high school's a mess, and physically, and it's a difficult place for children to be, and even young adults, and so time to move. So you can get into a house, you can sell it, and hopefully make a few dollars, and then move up in your housing and move up in your child's educational opportunities. And we've heard that forever, and those numbers would substantiate that, 23 people in the high school level. So, I mean, it's just, I've been listening to that for 25 years, at least. So, just my comment.
so Chris, and building off that comment, because I think it's an interesting, important one, do you have any sense about reputation? I mean, I think that, like, academically, that there, and I think that, just from my understanding of the U.S. News World Report and kind of that, I mean, the accolades that your facility should be getting out of that, I mean, do you think that that's playing a role, that reputation may have pushed, or that reputation potentially could pull people in? I mean, if you're number one in the seacoast, that's got to be an attractor.
I think word
or-
of mouth and how you present it, it makes a world of difference. I think, in the last 5 years, I've seen more people call from out of state, hey, we're a young family moving to Newmarket, what's your school like? Can we come visit it? Can we come take, tours? And these are parents who have third graders. So they're already thinking about the high school phenomenon. And I'll revert them back to the U.S. World News Report. This is where we stack up from everybody in the state as well as nationally. So I think that perception has changed quite a bit, I think if you were to walk through our building 5 years ago compared to now already, it's a much different feel, space size and feeling and cleanliness and things of that nature. So I think it's changed, because I think that would be, fair that was word of mouth and would have happened, but I think it's changed.
But Skip, to your comment, I would also think, and that's why it's interesting, I mean, I take your anecdotal comment saying, I don't think a lot of it was specifically premises moves, that may have been thrown in from time to time, but it wasn't your walk away. But when you're young families and you're starting out in your career, this may be a more affordable area. And
Absolutely.
5 or 8 down years the road, if you're working in here and you're progressing, you may want to say, I want to trade up to a more expensive house or a nicer community or something like that. So there's so many, potential reasons in here. I'm at least taking some solace in the fact that you're saying everybody who came in that was moving said, I'm moving because your high school's in terrible shape. It seems to be the opposite of that. That wasn't the first reason anybody.
Again, the whole context of this discussion is just planning for numbers.
Yeah.
Planning for students. And I would ask, Ingrid, you've done several newer schools. I mean, we visited several of them in communities. Well, I'm trying to think of what might be the best example. Hanover is not the good comparison, but have you found any feedback from when you build a new school? Do people, is it a magnet?
It is a magnet, and if you build it, they will come, is a phenomenon. Increased house values is another one that people are always curious about. But it's really about the kids, it's about the staff, it's about the parents, it's about the faculty, and everyone thinks that people can conduct education in any sort of environment, and people do a lot of good work in very poor conditions. But if you can get that facility up to snuff and to state standards and a light, bright, beautiful place to live, work, play, and just be in, it commands more respect, and the kids behave better. For instance, in Claremont, I mean, some of those walls, literally you could push the wall and it would move. And now the kids, and even in the bathrooms, we did a simple thing like take the doors off the bathrooms so that more supervision could be had. And the kids are respecting their environment a lot more. So it does a lot of good. But, you have to balance that with the cost of doing that and
Right.
not building the Taj Mahal either. So.
And you can't predict with mathematical certainty what's going to happen, but I guess it just goes back to the point of whatever solution we have, it has to be flexible enough, because there can be a swing here. We're not covered with farmland that's able to be developed into housing tracts, but and we can look in the JC report. I forget what the numbers are, but back in Chris, you may even know, back, I think it was in like 1999, whenever it peaked, I mean, there was how many more kids at the high school?
When I first started 10 years ago, we were at 640 kids in that building.
Okay.
That was the peak.
And we're at what now?
513 as of today.
So a little over 200. So they can be a swing. And so, I guess, without having a crystal ball, we just need to be mindful and account for that,
Usually, communities are very worried about overbuilding, because
Right.
what happens if the bubble or the trend keeps going down, because you can't predict it. So it's really about building the classrooms that you need for the current population, but building out your core areas big enough so that you can add on classrooms if you need them in 10 years.
But it also strikes me in thinking of all the variables in here. It's an interesting kind of metric equation. It seems Newmarket tries to keep the class size well below the quote-unquote maximum or standard of the state, and I would imagine other places do as well. And I may have forgotten numbers, but it sort of struck me as 28 or 30 was the largest class size, and Newmarket's class sizes were in the 15 to 21 range. In which case, I'm just thinking about space utilization, saying, you know, if the state is saying, if you build a new facility, you have to build it 20 or 30% larger than you want because of expected this and all that, you should be able to manage a 15 to 20% swing in
Right.
space if you're targeting a 20-person
At
classroom.
the high school level, you definitely can.
Okay.
That, because of the way your schedule is compacted, you have 6 sections of different disciplines. It's your middle school that can't absorb it. So right now, with 96 kids for 4 classrooms, that's when their content is taught. You know, it's 25 kids per class. That's at max. That's where you find, if we get bigger than 100 kids at a grade level, that's where you'll see a space crunch at the middle school level. High school level, you can absorb it. So
Well,
you're
and
right.
that step function would be interesting, because I'm sure we'd all want to feel comfortable out of this, that whatever gets done, we can handle a 15%, which, you know, you're talking 150 kids swing is 15% in 1,000 kids. And granted, it may be, no, you don't want 150 kids in the elementary school because you just need to add 8 classrooms. So where those step functions are and how much flexibility you have, it would be just nice to sort of know what we're building into this and stuff.
That's a very important point, is that class size. And normally schools target around 20 because they can do just that. They can ramp up with the existing classrooms or down.
I mean, in managing it, regardless of the educational content, that would, you know, just from a management of people thing, I would
Right.
tend to think that as well.
The other thing with the middle school we've done in the past is add maybe 1 or 2 flex rooms.
Right.
So you have a classroom-sized classroom that could be utilized for those bubble grades.
Has any, with the Newmarket growing, just, you know, the downtown, and it's become such more of a, you know, it has more of a nightlife, so to speak. And some of the other surrounding towns, like Portsmouth is just growing, and, you know, you're getting phased out to buy houses there. Does that come into account? I mean, if you had some type of new school plus, you know, people drive by here and go, wow, I didn't realize that your downtown is that beautiful and quaint. Does that take in, you know, consideration of, you know, we have a big development at the golf course and, you know,
Right.
another 10 houses.
It's hard to predict.
Yeah.
How do you know? And we've used Mark Joyce's and Randy Bell's.
There ain't
kind of-
much space in Newmarket.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you look at the golf course, we were just talking about this before, the low end of $350 a copy is, you're not attracting people with young kids.
And that's a 2-bedroom.
350, 2-bedroom.
So most of the developments that are going on, just my sense of it is, there's a lot of conservation space, there's not much developable land, unless you want to go in the Black Bear Tiff area, we got a whole bunch of space on it. And most of the stuff that's being built, strangely enough, because of the graying in New Hampshire and stuff like that, are either condo type or community organizations where there's a little less pressure on keeping your own maintenance done. And that's not attracting the young families that are looking for starter homes.
Good. What is the life expectancy of a reno? I mean, when we think about like other towns, how far out are they projecting? Are they thinking 20, 25, 30?
20, 25, you know, and it can change. That's the one public thing you need to say to people is yes, we are predicting it will last 20 years and your equipment will last 25 to 30 years. But that's just a guess, you know, and it's an educated guess, but it could change, you know, it could be you build it and they will come but you have to weigh all the factors, you know, how much more land is developable, how much more likely are people to move here with young kids. I mean, how do you predict who's moving here with kids and who's not? How do you predict who's moving out who has kids and who's not? So it's an ever-changing dilemma.
I think Newmarket has 55%, is that, which is unusually high of multi-unit housing.
That is.
Well,
It's a
there's
pretty
one
big
thing,
number, isn't it?
some of the things going on in Durham with all the housing downtown Durham, 800 units. I would say that that's gonna have an impact here because Durham has made a commitment to housing a different population in the downtown area. And just anecdotal from people that I know in the Durham community, that's gonna change the people that live in the outlying, you know, around the university area.
You think it's gonna take people out of Newmarket and move them closer?
I think that we'll see younger people, students going that way, and I think we'll see families coming this way.
Be interesting, only because of the rental and the multifamily stuff. Interesting change. We gotta build flexibility in, that's
Right.
for sure.
Exactly.
But you know, the multifamily that exists here, the square footage of the units is relatively small compared to other communities. So they won't, they're not built to house family units. And actually, they're built to have less people in them, according to the square footage. So that's an interesting thing, but it's quite true. If you look at the average square footage of the multifamilies in town, it's relatively small.
Yeah, I think, I'm just trying to remember back, we've been through this stuff so many times, but I was remembering there was a time people were saying, you know, one of the reasons we had so many kids in the elementary school is because we had rental units and we had young kids in the rental units. And then I remember some of the developers coming back and say, you're wrong. The rental units don't have many kids in them. It's not the same proportion. It's mostly coming from, you know, the condos or the private homes. There's not like 42,000 kids in the rental units because you have a lot of rent. And you, Skip, you're sort of saying the same
Really,
thing. There's not enough room.
very small number. Percentage is very small. The children are in the single-family homes, some in condominiums, but mostly single-family homes, and some of our older 4- and 6-unit buildings close to downtown. But the large rental projects that exist, very few kids.
It was just, it wasn't intuitive, but
Right.
it turns out to be the.
It's the fact.
And so that's unlikely to change, you know, given the limited square footage.
Correct.
Okay. So how do we, what's the next step on this? Mark, you asked for a report on incoming versus outgoing. We ought to sort of, as a group, sort of get our arms around this and sort of come to a conclusion as best we can, you know, because, and I think we may have moved the ball a little forward on this tonight. I was sort of intrigued of the acuteness of the issue, how it all of a sudden in 1 year sort of the curve seemed to fall off. But I've heard at least one explanation that makes sense to me here tonight is, you know, the Exeter School District finishing their new high school, and people maybe moving out in that timeframe.
I think if we get elementary school, just so we have a judgment on if we get ins and outs, but I sort of look at the principals as knowing more than we do, where the people who are keeping the stats on how to organize this in a way that, you know, if you're saying moving is all the same, or no, we know moving is really 2 categories, and we can break that. I'd like to see that organized in a way where we can say year by year, there's 50 moved in this year, 12 moved in last year, and what the major reasons are.
We'll never pin it down to the precise number, but we can get a comfortable enough feel to go forward. And the other big point Ingrid mentioned about this is it's about the core spaces, really, because you can't effectively rebuild those once you've built them. So that needs to accommodate, you know, potential, you know, bubbles, if you will, and more so than the classroom space, which maybe is easier, if you will, to add on if need be. But thanks, Chris, for that. Appreciate it.
Can I, just real quick, I think that, you know, some of the discussion that we're having is really about current needs. Like, I think that, you know, there were significant current needs on the table, and so some of this is, you know, it's not marginal, but it's on that periphery of this. So I think, you know, part of me says these are really great numbers to look at, and I'd like to see those trend lines, but also focusing on the current needs issues, and then the flex space, and you know, because it seems like that, you know, building 1 or 2 flex space
Right.
is
Smart.
is very smart, and probably marginal in terms of the total cost.
STEM labs are a new thing that are coming up more and more, and schools are having us convert older spaces, you know, and giving up other program spaces for this new technological space. So that's another thing that should be on this.
Well, that was one of the thoughts I know people had when the Carpenter property was built. That STEM concept was coming out at the same time we
Right.
built that, and people were saying, well, it could be like a specialty STEM. Everybody goes across the street for STEM classes.
Long-distance learning is another one, where kids can go on the internet and learn from other kids in other countries, you know, and So there's a whole host of other program elements that we haven't really added to the programs, but again, that's kind of working with the principals through this program exercise to figure out what the minimum needs are, then talk about some of the wants to see if this group wants to include those or not.
Just while we're on the topic, has there been consideration of distant learning classrooms?
I haven't heard it.
Yeah, I mean, we had talked about it at school board on Thursday. If you're looking towards the future, that's where you can do it, but you can set it up in a classroom that could be used for that if you wanted to. Just equip a 900 square foot classroom, and then that period of the day, that's where it becomes. So, you know, but the other discussion is, you know, if we built a new school, I would never do a computer lab, dedicated computer lab. I'd have computers go into the classroom and not have a, you know, 1,200 square foot classroom where you go to computers go into your room. You put it on a cart and you move it. Most kids carry a smartphone, and you can do a lot with that. So, reorganizing that space with Ingrid staying, you know, and now it was STEM now it's STEAM. So they're incorporating the arts into the rest of it. So those spaces are becoming, you know, hot topics as well. In the report, you saw Zen dens, you know, at the elementary school, because that's the hot topic of having private spaces. So,
Well, it seems in looking at the space, as you go where it doesn't exist, most of that seems to be in specialty. So I sort of come back and say, everybody used general classrooms a lot more in the past. And now making, gee, either because of sped students or art or music, you know, the music room, to me, when I was growing up, was, you called it the music room. Looked an awful lot like a classroom, except it didn't have desks, it had chairs. Versus now the acoustics and you know, shop class used to be the only specialty room that I remember back in the day. And now it seems a good 30-40% of the additional you know, what you need additionally seems to be specialized rooms, either because of the needs of the kids or because of a specialty skill or something like that. Interesting.
Another thing that needs to be looked at is the media centers, because they're changing into learning centers.
Yep.
You know, so even though, and it's hard because we're trying to solicit input from the staff and faculty, but we can't design for a particular person, and they have to remember that.
Yep.
Because we are designing for 20 to 30 years. And what is the ed specs that the principals and this group want to carry further to create that flexibility and to allow programs to evolve?
Also, with a new high school, since you're adding on, do you want any technical trades here?
that
Apparently you have none,
because we send over to SST, so that wouldn't be a need.
because you have a wood shop. Is there any other, maybe not formal technical training, but other spaces?
All right, so, Chris, I don't know if, is next Wednesday pushing it for this too, or should we push that
That
off?
would be easy,
Okay,
Clark. So,
maybe we can do that. We can narrow up both of these things in at a meeting next Wednesday. Russ?
So Mike, I just,
Yep.
at some point, we will have the infamous number, correct? Of students, population. I mean, it seems like everyone's skirting around. No one wants to say, okay, at 5 years from now, we're gonna have so many students, 10 years, but at some point, that number has to come up.
I think it'll be a range.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely,
And
a range, yeah.
the range is gonna be based on if we're comfortable on this, because my simple brain says, look, we failed that
It's in this
vote in
one, too.
2006. Boom, there goes the curve. People are scrambling out of that old building. That may not be the case.
I think
And
the
it-
Joyce report.
what's in the
Yeah.
Joyce report?
Page
Was
11.
pretty reasonable.
Yeah, and so,
Said it's about the same, give or
so
take.
I guess the answer is I think we're getting a lot closer, but I think that's coming soon, but we need to have had to explain these things, and we'll need to explain it ultimately to, I guess, the school board and the public, and so they're comfortable with it too. But I really just think, keeping our mind on the big things, we can't predict the future. We know what the population of the school was, so what we need to do is plan for those core spaces that would accommodate that if that happens again, and then flex rooms. So it's, this isn't a situation where we have to pin it down to a certain number. It's never gonna be a number. It's gonna be a range. So, thank you very much, Chris, for all that. And Russ, you were going to talk, you had a couple of handouts.
Yeah, I just put together 2 sheets, one-sheeters that I thought would be useful, could be referenced later on. But the first one, I don't know which one, if you look at the one with the pie chart, this is from Christine Loon, who's the financial guru of the school system and puts the budgets together. And we had talked a few times during the year, and we can drill down more if you're interested. But if you look at the $16 million school budget, 13 million or 81% now, and that continues to be a growing number, is just simply salary, benefit, and professional costs. The contracted services and the contracted obligated services, the biggest one is transportation, which you can see is $1.2 million and takes another 7.8%. So as we were talking about when we're building buildings, and if we got more efficient boilers and we could save tons on energy, we took out the utilities, and so the utilities currently are about 400,000, and if you drill below that, it's, 50 or 80,000 for fuel oil, 50 or 80,000 for electricity. There's not a huge number floating around, and that may simply because our boilers don't work, and that's where we save the fuel.
Cost saving.
So I'm all for sort of heating things. But as far as Mike's point, where there's been a lot of interesting ideas done about cogeneration facilities and being able to have a facility where you package food for the rest of the 3,000 kids that are in your school system from one location, I'm not sure that model is going to have any real significant savings over the long run. If we build a third building, it's going to be more, for sure. If you stay with 2 buildings, can you make it more efficient? It depends on what you do, and maybe you can, but if you're looking to save $500,000 a year, that ain't going to happen on the energy side or anything like that. So I just wanted to give that out so you have at least a reference tool, and as we go through, this is the way Christine thinks of the numbers, and if you want to drill down, we can drill down further.
Looking at it on a one-year basis, I guess I would agree. But over the long haul, let's say you could save, $100,000 a year on your utilities, your heat, or whatever, in your building for a 30 to 40, 50 years school. I mean, that's money that matters to this community. And so it's in that context that I would discuss those things. It's not, as I would say again, and I agree with you, Russ, it's not a silver bullet, but there are appreciable savings based on, based on some ideas that we saw at other schools in terms of code generation. But not only that, it's not only the operating cost of the budget, it's the equipment cost. Which can upfront be a big spend. If you're running 2 boilers at 2 or 3 different buildings, whether they be town buildings or other buildings, you got to buy those things, and they expire. So it's not simply the operational cost. So but we're on the same page.
I agree.
I got you.
And to your point, and that may lead into the next, so this was more of just putting a stake in the ground so you know what the basic percentage breakout is. If you have any questions, we have Christine who knows every number. I used to know most of the numbers when I was on the budget committee. Mike's, and we have several people. The other one was just giving you a financing cost overview. And to Mike's point, and I'm sorry if this looks a little strange because I did it, but
It's very readable.
okay. The principal loan is the top thing of saying it seemed realistic to take from 10 million to 30 million as a range of numbers we were talking about. Bond term financing, 20 to 30 years is the normal range that we would think of in there, and I put 25 in as well. The interest rates today, and they're going to be ticking up, but if we could get a 3% rate, it would be absolutely wonderful. I think the 6% or the 5% is more realistic, and Newmarket is not a wealthy town with a lot of cash reserves, so it's probably going to be in the middle to the higher end of the interest rate. But this will just lay it out for you. So what I tried to do was put the total bond cost, so if you just look up in the first left-hand side, at an interest rate of 3% for a 20-year bond, a 25-year bond, and a 30-year bond, the total cost would go from 13 million, okay? You're only borrowing 10, but it would cost you 13 to pay it off, to 14 million to 15 million if you spread it over 30 years. Your annual cost would go down a little bit. That's the underneath it, because you're borrowing the same amount, you're just paying it off over a longer period of time. And then the tax rate in Newmarket is based on what the total assessed value is. So I think as of 2015, I have the footnote down there, the latest numbers from Steve Fournier is $722 million. So that equates to every $722,000 of expense, whether it's added or subtracted to the town and schools combined budget, is equal to $1 in the tax rate. Okay, so pick any number you want, but to Mike's point, if you say, gee, the annual cost, if we did a 20-year bond for $10 million is only $665,000, so it would be lovely to know this would only cost us $10 million, but if you could save $50,000 a year, you're taking $50,000 off that 665, that's at least a number that would get your attention. If you look down at $30 million at a 6% interest rate, where you're ending up spending $2.1 million a year, the 50,000 is going to be a little less significant in that. And so, again, this is not selling on anybody, this is just a little chart for you to have to say as we start to talk numbers and percentages and terms. Term means something, interest rates mean a lot, every 1% is a swing factor. And to have you walk away with every $722,000 means $1 on the tax rate. It's just the basics of Newmarket as it is, no magic. If we need more as time goes on, you let me know and we'll put the finance screws together.
This is great, Russ. This is easy to follow.
Good.
All right. So next up, actually moving along pretty good here. So it's, I had a section for updates on site issues. I think it was last time we talked a little bit about the wetlands at Carpenter, and in the materials that I sent around, there was a drawing depicting the wetlands, and Ingrid's followed up with Jim Gove on that.
So this is my little pen scratching here. Low tech, but it does the deed here. So this is the Carpenter property here, outlined in red. The high school is over here. This is South Main Street. So there's a big wetland in this corner. There's a small wetland, well, not small, but a smaller wetland than this one over in this area here. All of these buildings have been demolished and it's been flattened out here now. And there's a fairly, I'm not sure what the contours are, but there's a hole or a depression in the topography there. So what Jim Gove told me was that, I'm not sure what year, but several years ago now, he was hired to just flag the wetlands only. So there could still be flags out here. But when he flagged the wetlands, Ty and Bond, the civil engineer, used those to depict these lines. So that's how they got onto this plan. He suggested, really, one conservative measure is to assume that we could fill in these wetlands. He doesn't know if they're prime wetlands or not. These wetlands seemed much more special and could be prime wetlands, but you have to really go to the state and do a lot more investigation to see if they are prime wetlands. So if this site is one that you think we should look at putting buildings and trying to fill in part of some of these wetlands, he suggested that they reestablish the flags at about just under $1,000 to do that. Then set up a pre-application meeting with the DES, and he's coming next Wednesday, so I won't bore you because he'll tell you the same thing he told me. But basically, there's ways to mitigate if you're filling in wetlands with a state. You can either pay the state so that they can buy another property to secure better wetlands somewhere else in the state, or if the town or school owns other property in the town that has high-valued wetlands, you can trade it.
Right.
So,
There's a couple things, and that's great, because unfortunately, this is an area I've had to get a little bit involved in because of our community, but if those are only the wetlands, then depending on the type of wetlands there are, there's also a setback that you can't get near the wetlands, which could run anywhere from 25 to 100 feet. And so the wetlands that are there are taking up a fairly decent part of the property. If you, and I don't know footage-wise, but if you brought it in 25 to, if you expanded the wetland by 25 to 50 feet, saying you can't get within that space to the wetland,
right.
you may even shrink that usable space. The only other thing, and Mike and I have discussed this, and this was an old number, and it was from DES, and I think it was somebody's seat of the pants, but they were sort of saying your point. If you traded wetlands or had to buy other wetlands to retire into the pool, it's not an $80,000 item. It's more like a $750,000 to $1 million item. That would cost you an additional $1 million just to be able to get the rights to build on some of those wetlands. So there may be a fairly significant hidden cost in expanding beyond just the.
At the Lebanon schools, we had a vacant site that they did a new school and new fields on, and I can't remember exactly how many acres of wetlands they filled in to do it, but I want to say it was around 2. They ended up paying about $100,000 for doing that. But again, you don't know what that cost is until you're in negotiations with the DES and have done a lot of work to get there. So it's a risk, but it's a risk that you need to take and get conversations started with the DES so that you know what that cost is before you go to the bond vote for an approval.
Or really even before you start drawing things up that
Right.
go there. But just, you know, I did a little research on this, probably went in the wrong direction, but enough to be dangerous, I guess. But prime wetlands has a 100-foot setback. You know, non-prime has a 20-foot setback. Now, the most recent map on the DES website for Newmarket didn't have any prime wetlands within rock's throw of Carpenter. So I don't know if any of those are prime. I'm not gonna make that call, but these are questions we can ask Jim next week. But and also get a feel. I mean, maybe he'll have enough experience with this to know that, look, you know, he's actually walked this stuff. What might we have to pay for that? Are we talking $100,000? Are we talking $750? You know, what is it? And I've never been through the process. I'd like to just sort of hear what that process is. And you know, I know we're creeping up to winter here. Is this something the DS can look at when the ground's frozen? I don't know.
No, not as easy, not if you're trying to determine whether it's prime wetland or
Right.
man-made wetland. And we've also been in a drought for the past 6 years, according to the Army Corps of Engineers, who has their own opinion on when wetlands are. So I just found out this recently, unfortunately. NHSDES, it's checking to see if it's on the Army Corps of Engineers, which has their own list of New Hampshire wetlands and has their own rules and regulations. So we thought there was only one game in town, but there's another game in town.
So whatever it ultimately turns out to be, we need to understand and go through the process to make sure we're not talking about doing things out there that aren't feasible.
Can I just ask a question of clarification? So it looks like there are 4 homes, are there private homes, so the property kind of, it
Yes.
doglegs up there, so and then it's wooded behind those homes, so much of that property, it looks like maybe 50% from what you're looking at, if you're standing, you know, on the, pulling out of the junior, senior high, is, you actually don't even see, yeah, most of that's not even visible from.
Right.
So it's twice as big, even without the wetlands.
Correct.
Than is visibly there.
Right.
Correct, yeah.
Yeah, it's a pretty big parcel. And if you look at the parcel of the elementary school, it's like 2 of those.
Yet I thought in the plans you gave us, if you were to put 2 ball fields there, you'd have
Right.
to use the wetlands area to be able to do that, so.
Wood. And
from a
parking.
building point of view, you may be able to get a building close to the road or where the parking area is, but
You can't get it all.
you can get,
You mentioned Ty and Bond, because they had that drawing in their package, so my question is it possible for them to give us the buildable area, less the wetlands?
Sure.
You know, and I think it's reasonable to assume that there would only be a 20-foot setback for most of that wetlands. If we assumed a 20-foot setback, what would the number be?
Right.
You know, I have a Ty and Bond drawing, but they've crossed out all of the, any reference to who did it or when it
Ah,
happened,
okay.
so.
Yeah, that would be helpful. It may turn out that certain solutions that you wouldn't even implicate
Right,
wetlands.
so it's
Yeah.
just I have the drawing that Doucette had done initially, which did not have that Rodriguez piece, that little leg that comes out right there. Yeah.
Right.
That's like 1.034 acres or something, and there's a little touch of wetlands in it. But it was not on Doucette's map for some reason or another.
Well, we've seen it two ways, too.
And he called it 15.03 acres without that piece.
Okay.
And I know that when I looked at the purchase and sales agreement with the town and Carpenters, that
Right.
both of those pieces were mentioned.
So they are in it.
That there's two pieces in the
Okay.
P&S agreement.
yeah, one has space and the other one doesn't tell you how much space, but it has measurements or something.
Right, but I didn't understand why Doucette never picked up that Rodriguez piece, and I asked him, and he.
That's
at-
right
At
here?
the time, yeah, at the
Yeah.
time, he didn't recall. However, his drawing calculates 15 point something acres, and that's kind of what the P&S says too.
Okay.
So, anyway, the other drawing I have is the Ty and Bond drawing, which
Right.
shows the Rodriguez piece. And, so I was curious to see what the acreage is with that piece.
How long have
Just
you
what
owned
Ty
this?
and Bond said.
How long have you owned it?
3 years maybe, max.
2012.
Hold
So
on.
there's a tax
I have
card
the
on it.
agreement here somewhere.
So there's a tax card on it, and it should say what the acreage is on that?
No,
Oh.
the interesting, it's
Ah.
New Hampshire. There were two parcels. One parcel had, 3,822 feet
Oh.
and equivalent to 15 acres, and the other one just had, it's 212 feet by 43 feet.
Well, the deed.
But I'm not telling you how much acreage it is, so
The
it
deed
never.
did say, on the Rodriguez deed, it did say 1.034 acres. And a piece of that had some wetlands that was delineated by Jim Gove.
So in asking Ty and Bond to calculate the approximate buildable acreage, are you asking for 20 feet just on the wetlands on the left?
No,
or
you
for
have
both?
to do it.
Both.
Okay, for both.
I think you have to.
The ones on the left, that kind of pyramid type thing,
Mm-hmm.
you'd have 20 feet. The one on the right, which also looks like a lake, not a wetland, you're gonna have
Pond,
20
small
feet
pond.
surrounding the
Yeah,
entire thing.
surrounding that whole
Okay.
piece.
So you're losing 40 feet.
So worst case?
Actually, it doesn't surround because the town owns the
Yeah.
land above the dotted
It's
line.
actually like this.
Right, the town owns the land above the dotted line.
Right.
Where your hand is, your left hand is, and that's all wetlands.
Right here.
That whole thing. So it's like 3/4 of that around
Yeah,
that
it
piece.
connects to this.
And that's, although when I spoke to Jim about that piece with the question mark, that wetlands, he called that a typical forested wetland.
Right.
However, to the right of it is a higher quality wetland, right next to it, that feeds a stream, intermittent stream that goes all the way along the property
Oh,
line.
right.
Right,
Here.
back to the other wetland, so,
And that may be more than
Calls it a
prime.
drainage ditch.
well, I don't believe there's any, yeah. Good man, good, I like that.
Good trade.
I don't think that, I don't think there's any prime wetlands even close. Prime wetlands are like the Tuttle Swamp,
Right.
out there off Ash Swamp
Cattails
Road.
and,
I mean,
That's Great Bay, and, yeah.
you know, well, I'm talking Tuttle Swamp out off of 152 and Ash Swamp Road. That's prime wetlands, and it's listed as prime wetlands. And there's nothing here that's even close to that.
So maybe a couple different figures. Maybe we've said it already, but I would want the buildable area including this,
okay,
but also the buildable area without it, right? And then we'll determine what it might take
Well, you're looking for two calculations. What's the calculation of the wetlands? Then what's the calculation for a setback, a 20-foot setback from them? And then what's the calculations for the remaining upland?
And we can get a quick narrative as to what they think the implications on building on
I
it.
mean, visually, you're losing probably 25-30% just on the wetlands of the total property. And if you
No
add
question.
the buffer in, maybe you'd be 30-40% of the property would be taken out of bounds.
Well, the notes essentially on the drawing that I sent around, was don't touch this in all events. But you can fill this in. It's just a matter of what the cost is. But again, and these calculations are gonna be good to know. It might be de minimis, who knows? If it's $100,000 to fill that in, that's not so limiting. If it's $1 million, that's a different story. But the moreover is that maybe it won't matter in all events. Maybe
Yeah.
there's enough space there for.
Sorry, for some reason, I have everything except the actual description of the property in words.
It's upstairs. They have it in the office upstairs, so. I did read it. I should have taken a copy of it, but.
So quick question, there's the word hole that you just mentioned.
Right.
Did anybody express any concerns about that? And
No, I just wanted to show that, the topography, it looks flat when you look across there, but it's not. There is and I don't know if these are 2 or 5 or 10-foot contours. So if they're 2-foot contours, which I think they are, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. It's like a 14-foot depression out there.
I suspect somebody hauled some material out of there
Yeah,
a long time ago.
yeah, that's
Used it out front.
probably a
Yeah, I think if we did some borings. and-
Repositioning?
It is
I
pretty flat
think if
out
we did
front.
some borings and some test pits, we'd find the soil changes.
So it's like the height of this room, the slope goes down.
And tree trunks in the old days were used a lot for landfill,
Give me more wood.
and they don't last as landfill. They create these gaping holes in driveways and stuff like that.
So, it'll be
Sinkholes.
good to have Jim Gove in, so be ready with your wetlands questions and, next Wednesday. So, next up is, we have 3 new drawings, 3 new conceptual drawings that we're gonna
Yeah.
go over. And again, just for public iteration, this is the second set of drawings. These are only conceptual drawings. There's no decisions being made here. We're just sort of weighing the possibilities and pros and cons.
Yeah, so we're trying to keep this, again, conceptual. Like we have the program, and now it's just about the big picture, and then we'll jump into the smaller things. So we looked at the site, this is no build, this has some opportunities, high school site, elementary school site, and then there's this other parcel next to the elementary school that we're looking at possibly utilizing in some of the schemes, which is another piece that the town's looking into. So, quick recap from last time, we looked at doing an addition at the high school, as well as doing an addition at the elementary school. Discussions came out of this as to bringing the 6th grade down to the elementary school and looking at what that comes up with. So that's kind of one thing that we looked at last time.
And just to be clear, Chris, on these, we're talking additions, but we're also talking, a thorough renovation.
Complete
Of
renovation.
the building.
Yep.
And maybe a little less so at the elementary school, but,
Right.
doing something different with a front entrance to make it more secure.
Yeah, and that'll be defined as what the scope is. There's, in some of the classrooms, there's bathrooms in the classrooms, and do we want to leave them there, or do we want to pull them all out, open up the classrooms? And that'll be more of a, how far into this do we want to get?
Can I just interrupt for just 1 second? I had questions, people asked me what renovations meant. And so I don't know whether, I don't want to sidetrack this, but
Yeah.
I think at some point it would be very helpful to either have, either visual images of what renovations mean, or
Sure.
what you guys mean
So,
by renovation.
Just quickly, for the high school piece of it, a renovation, we would assume, we would be taking off the inside of the exterior walls, we would be insulating the exterior walls, putting in a new surface, new floors, new ceilings, because we would be doing new mechanical, which is not air conditioning in some areas, but new ventilation, new heating, new lighting, new wiring, new wireless for technology. So in order to do all those renovations, you'd need new ceilings. New floors in areas where we need new floors. I know you've done some recent upgrades, so we wouldn't touch those. We'd look at reusing as many doors as we could, but doing ADA compliant hardware, new walls, new code requirements, new toilet fixtures. So it'd basically be a gut rehab, if you will, just like you would do, you know, if you were doing a major renovation of your house. The elementary school is a bit different because the quality of that school is much nicer than at the high school. So we'd have to look at what level of renovation, and it's easy to kind of cost out the gut reno of the high school piece of it, but the elementary school is kind of a minor renovation, if you will. So we'd only touch certain things. I don't even know if you have any asbestos there, you probably don't. Oh, you do? So, oh, you don't believe, yeah. So, you know, we'd look at some of the finishes where things are worn, we'd look at the age of your utility systems to make sure that those are gonna last the next 20 years. Roofs, all the systems so that you don't really have to touch your building for at least 15 years, and then at 15 years, you have some motors to rebuild and things that you have to maintain. So does that answer?
Yes, thank you very much.
Anyway, windows too, plus.
Yes. We'd look at the cost of those, though, because usually the payback's like 20 to 30 years, so it depends on the age of the windows. In some instances, in like Claremont, we did 3 faces, and they left the 4th face because of the cost to do as a capital expense later on.
And a lot of that, say like, if we're looking at windows or new roof with insulation, we can have that as an alternate priced out. So we can look at, you know, it's gonna cost $400,000 for a new roof or $400,000 for new windows, where a new roof, you're gonna go from an R, say 10 to an R60, or windows are gonna go from an R1 to an R2. So it's pretty easy to see the payback on the energy efficiencies there. But we'll have all those options that we can talk about. So that was one option we looked at. And another option, just quickly, was what happens if we do a smaller addition here, a middle school, and then a high school, breaking it into 3 schools. And we all kind of discussed that that's might not be the route we want to go, just because you're adding another everything, essentially.
We just looked at that scenario too at the Wyndham schools, and they were projecting of building a new 7th and 8th grade, 500 student school. They would spend approximately $1.5 million in additional operating and salary costs. So you add that over 20 to 30 years, and it just blew it out of the water.
So then we went back and looked at, one of the things we discussed was moving the 6th grade, and then doing some type of community space as well. So when we looked at that, if we move the 6th grade down, we're looking at adding in an addition for the 6th grade, which would be roughly 18 to 20,000 square foot addition that'll give you everything you need for the elementary school, plus adding the 6th grade there. So, and that's just kind of big ballpark number. So we're adding an addition, we're also enlarging the gym, but we're adding on a gym so that you can take over the existing gym cafetorium and have that be your cafeteria. With that, we've also shown is utilizing that piece of property adjacent to the school, which gives you a new loop road all the way around the school, reworked the parking, added on a new main entrance. So kind of, again, a comprehensive look at what the school could possibly look like with moving the 6th grade down, getting rid of all the portables, and getting everybody into the school in one location.
Still ends up having one egress point though, right?
Well, you have this road, and then we're gonna have this road down here.
Or you could also keep the existing road too.
You could keep the existing, or this could come around and then go back out.
You might have like a parent drop-off up
Right.
front and a bus drop-off out back,
Exactly.
which is problematic now.
Yep.
Is that extra space also a wetland issue? I think, Mike, you said if that's the space I'm thinking of.
We don't know.
Yeah, that's under review, Russ.
Yeah.
And there is a brook back here, and I've actually walked it out here, but it's most of this is fairly.
It's really flat. This kind of right here.
Science
really,
class.
Really slopes quickly.
Yeah, I just wouldn't want to end up
Moonlight
with
Brook.
a piece of property and then we have to pay twice for it to find out we have to landfill it.
Those wetlands.
Yeah, so with this, it lightens the load on the high school. We get everything down at the elementary school.
6 is down there.
6 is down here. We've had 180 parking spaces that we could get, and that's packed in, down out in front of your school.
How many more is that than existing?
I have to look back at my notes.
Nobody's counted it.
Counted about
Figure out, like, talk to all-
It's probably at least another 50 or 60. I would
Okay,
guess.
so you're doubling, you
Yeah.
estimate that you're doubling parking,
Yeah.
It was, I know when I was putting all these in, it was more than double.
more than.
On these different designs, and it's great to have the picture, but just to this point, if we could have a little cheat sheet
Tab,
that says
yeah.
was 150 parking, now 300.
I think at our last meeting, we talked about, at a minimum, it needed 50 more spaces
Right.
to the elementary school. Looks like you achieved that and then some.
Right.
It was I think it was almost 3 times as much. but-
Oh, there's the playground, I got it.
Yeah, so, and just massing wise, and we're gonna go back, once we kind of finalize a path of where we wanna have these blocks, and look at, do we want the gym, right now, we have the gym adjacent to the cafeteria, and it also is off the main entrance, so theoretically, you could lock down the school wings. For after-hours use, people could come in, use the cafeteria and the gym all as one space. But also, you have the playground down here and possibly a field down here, would you want the gym on this end? And we could look at what that looks like. That would mean possibly another entrance, and do you want kids coming in the main entrance to use the gym, or do you have another outside entrance from a security standpoint, operationally wise? Do you want that? Pros and cons, and we'll look at all those, moving it around in different locations. But essentially, it's adding on 18 to 20,000 square feet plus the gym, reworking the main entrance, giving it a new fresh look with a secured entrance. All new parking in a loop road. We probably keep the buses coming around back, keep the students, well, the parents away from that. So the parents would have this nice long drop-off space. Buses could ring around the building and go out.
And you wouldn't have kids crossing this road, or this access road, I should say, where.
Yep, yeah, and that was another thing, is if we do have that down on one end, say parents could drop off to the preschool or the elementary school, they could come directly in there, and then the playground would be adjacent to that, so that kids wouldn't be crossing any streets to go to that playground. So that was kind of one option there.
And quickly with the 6th grade, is that a 2-story building?
That would be a 2-story wing at the end.
So everything else would stay 1 story. The gyms areas are kind of 2.5 stories, if you will.
And you would need an elevator.
You would.
Yep.
But this would get rid of the portables. This
Yes.
Portables.
Is it fair to say the 6th grade creates the 2nd floor, and if you stayed with 5th grade, it would only be 1 floor?
Yep.
Right,
Where some of it,
That brings the elevator in.
yes.
things like with adding the gym. If we didn't add the gym, we could keep, since like 2 classrooms here, I pulled over into this space and thinking we'll have administration and support space in there. But if you didn't add such a new proper sized gym, you could capture some of these classrooms, reduce the
But
size
that's not
of
going to
that.
happen, is it, Sean?
Yeah.
No.
So there's all those little things in play where if you reduce one,
I
you
can
can reduce the
tell you
other.
firsthand, I had 25 first and second, no, kindergarten and first graders playing basketball in that little gym. I was traumatized. Saturday.
Well, if you think they have to eat their lunch
Yeah,
at the same
yeah,
time.
yeah, that-
So essentially, scope-wise, that's kind of the rough scale of what we're looking at. I think it gets you a dedicated playground. You also have all this space out here, which right now you've got some portables in this space, and this is kind of a wasteland, no man's land out behind the school. So that would be cleaned up.
They do have a garden area out there that they use, but
So that could get.
if you lose the portables, you're opening up a lot of space to them.
Yeah, do we do some garden space out here? Also has some great space adjacent to this. And having this property also has some great opportunities with working with the town on, you could do some type of nature trail, hiking trail, where the students now go out to kind of these lands to do snowshoeing. Could you get town activity, build a bridge over that stream and have this really great nature walk out to the fields and the town kind of multi-function space out there, which would really tie in this whole space all together without
You
having
could
to
make
put
a
kids.
nature trail that goes, community access nature trail that would go, between the 3 different properties.
Yeah, which could be pretty neat. So that was kind of one option for the elementary school we looked at.
So one question we have is, we've done a layout assuming that this property is in the count. Should we be looking at worst case if this property doesn't happen, what we can do on this?
Absolutely, because that's definitely,
Right.
it's not a certainty, so, the McGrath property is what
Right.
it's called, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
We'll
So-
see that in the next option.
Yep.
This in the situation,
It's kind of-
listening.
Because the way that would work, Ingrid, you
10 years
probably know this, is in order, the school has to, the school would have to go to a vote in March to buy that, even if we wanted to buy it today.
Right.
You know, in order to get that approved, it's by statute. The school can't acquire land,
Even if you have
Has
the
to
money
go
to
to
pay
vote.
for it.
have to have the money, and you have to have the vote.
Yeah, you have to have the approval for land acquisition.
Yep.
So obviously, having the land gives you a lot more flexibility, but I think we need to show, if that doesn't happen, the conservative approach of what it will look like.
Well, one of the things on
The
Dr.
buildable space concept too, it's-
Dr. Joyce's report specifically mentioned, if you can grab any adjacent land as a school district, do it, given what we have. He said it at both sites. But I would think especially so at this, there's some wetlands, this may or may not come into play over here that the school owns. It's a swamp.
Right off the-
Trade those wetlands, there we go.
They're looking for uplands.
Oh, yeah, right,
They want uplands. They don't want to trade equal wetlands.
right.
So, and in the next option, we show without this, with a smaller addition, but we can just grow that, kind of extrapolate from there.
But this, what this property is, while we're on the topic, would allow you to do is have an adequate, and you really couldn't do this loop road without this property, could you?
You could, it would
Not
just,
without running it through the playground.
right,
It makes everything a lot smaller,
yeah.
so you really get
And your
this
play,
reduced size.
yeah, and your playground is really, it's over here now. Well,
Right.
it's on the other side of that access road.
So
Yeah,
we
it's tiny.
push it out, make,
Is there a state
No
recommended
SUVs
size for
allowed on
playground?
that.
Because I've always thought that playground seemed
It seems small to me,
very,
yeah. It's a narrow spot, and it's hard for, if you're a child not interested in equipment, there's not a lot of other things to do. We've used that front field area off by the parking lot. We'll send some teachers out there in case kids want to play like touch football or something on that line. But
That's why I think the gym's so important. I mean,
Right.
it's great to have the outdoor space, but considering how isolated it is, having a gym that you can have a lot of activities in, rain or shine. is-
exactly.
Well, Mike, you brought up the fact of the wetlands is now, that swamp, call it wetlands, is part of the lot, part of the land that presently the school is on.
Yeah.
And when this development subdivision was put together, this Durrell property, the original proposals brought before the planning board were that up to 50% of the open space, common lands in this subdivision could be granted to the school. Now, of course, the site for the school came from that subdivision. Mr. Cheney donated that. And, however, the piece that's directly behind the school, shown by the dotted land there, there's a ledge site there.
Yeah.
It's wooded and it's ledge, but it's dry. It's not out of the realm of possibility to think about trading that wet for that piece, which would not upset the apple cart in terms of the subdivision approval for the amount of open space that was dedicated
Right.
for the subdivision. So that's another piece that I think really needs to be investigated. Even though that's a ledge site, the ledge can go away. It does cost some money, but the material has value. And So that's just another way of looking at it. And I think that needs to be pursued, because I think when the town looked at this before, the stopping point for pursuing that easement came from the town, and I think it needs to be revisited. I think that's a worthwhile effort, and I think that there's a possibility that trade could be made. So, for what it's worth, I think it should be revisited.
That could be great, if not from a building standpoint, but for field use, for playgrounds and so, because you could easily achieve everything you need building-wise and then have a great.
And just so everybody knows, though, this is, just, the Durrell development is like in this area on the map, if you will. It's all the way back here. The wetlands we're talking about are over here, they're right along Durrell Drive.
It's kind of right here.
There you go. Yeah, here's the swamp, or the wetlands. And here's the area that Skip's was just talking about back here. This is the ledge area. Even if you drive by it, you can see it. It's like, what, 10 feet high?
Yeah.
It's like that, yeah.
Yeah. So,
Like
this is,
you want to check the school board minutes, because I know 2 years ago, they were talking about purchasing that
We're
legend.
looking
There was
at-
a held up, it was held up for some reason.
We're
It was
looking
held
at
up by
it,
the
yeah.
planning department, it's as
Yeah.
simple as that. The planning department's, I believe, position was that if you, since that particular piece right behind the school, the ledge area that we're talking about, was part of the dedicated open space for the subdivision, that if you took that, and even though the association that owns that presently was willing to give it to the school, give it to the school department, it would then
Trigger a review with the.
trigger a problem with the original subdivision approval. But the point I'm making this evening is that the school department already owns that wetland, which is enough land to trade for
Oh.
that, that ledge site, which would give no cause for any issue with the subdivision, with the initial subdivision approval.
Plus, if they gave it as an easement and not a land
No, no,
swap,
no.
would that require the subdivision review?
No, the
Near
folks that are, the
premises
folks that are
liability.
willing to do this, to the best of my knowledge, are willing to do this on a swap, a fee simple basis,
Okay. Right.
which causes no problems for insurance or any of the other.
Versus liability.
Any of the other liability issues that could be involved. And I don't think I'm speaking out of turn or out of class, because I've spoken to these folks this past week. And what they were willing to do a few years ago, they're still willing to do. And I just think it needs to be pursued.
Absolutely.
thanks for that background work, Skipper.
It's an issue for the school board, Skip? Issue for the school board.
Yeah, I would say so.
This is that other piece of property that we're looking at.
Right.
It's already cleared, and then you can see there is another little pond in here. So kind of right at the property line, slopes down to that pond. So this could be a really neat little nature trail.
There is a trail already out here, actually, isn't there?
Yeah, the kids
Like,
cut through already.
okay. But it, you know.
Goat path.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know if anybody's done any test pits or any type of exploratory work on that piece of property we're talking about, the property next door. But if that holds true with the other soils in the rest of the area, that should be a pretty sandy piece of ground right there. So,
Good thing or bad thing being a sandy piece?
I think a good thing, across the street in that open field over there, that's a much different soil type. But that soil type for that particular piece of property, I believe, is a pretty sandy soil, and I think for what we're talking about here, certainly can't be a bad thing.
New England sand is good.
It's easier on drainage. versus the
Back.
clay that's.
Back to this first option. This would be adding on to elementary school. Let me jump over to the high school. And again, we're thinking of a comprehensive renovation, so we're renovating the entire space. And because we moved the sixth grade down, we're doing a smaller 20,000 square foot addition at the high school of new science labs, classrooms, support space.
Is that one or two?
Two
Two
stories.
stories, so I can kind of come off the end there.
Yep.
This
It's
is already,
10,000 swap, isn't it approximately in space?
8,000. 7,989.
so that would be a two-story addition off the end of the school. And again, we can look at all the different areas and ways we would do it. And then we'd infill and do an enlarged cafeteria, a new main entrance, new school security, upgrade the fitness center, and a new addition there. And this is a smaller addition because we're looking across the street at a new community center, which could be your performance center, your gathering space. And that I've listed out, if you're gonna do between 300 and 360 seats, that's roughly 9,000 square feet. And then if you do 600 to 650 seats, that's roughly 18,000 square feet. And then if you go to 1,000 to 1040, that's 26,000 square feet. So just kind of overall numbers of what that building would look like.
From a conceptual point of view, is that community center necessary for either of the schools? Or is that just saying, you talked about a community center, it may have some use to the schools, but not much. So I'm just looking at that as, gee, if the town wanted a community center on that property, that would be great, but if it's not necessary for the school utilization,
right.
it could be a separate project or a separate vote on that, that is a way to perhaps cut down the expense.
When we met with the music and drama faculty and staff, one of their needs, they suggested, was a performance space, bigger than what you have now. So actually, this renovation takes out the stage as part of the high school renovation, assuming that some sort of performance space / athletic space or whatever this is, and we need to talk collectively about what that is, or does it need to stay in the high school and stay a stage where they could utilize, and maybe it's a smaller, smaller performance center there. This
is another thing where there's no substitute for experience. I went to the improv show. I didn't catch this one this year. I went to it last year. The space is awful. It's awful. It really is. I mean, you're stacked on top of one another in folding chairs. There's no pitch to it, and it's just, I have a bad knee, so I could barely sit through the whole thing. I couldn't move much. There's no space to get around. It's tight.
Acoustically, it's hard.
The stage is kind of quaint and it's neat. It's got it's kind of got an antique feel to it, but that's another, if we do a day in school, let's catch a play or something. Because
my reason for bringing it up is only options.
Yeah.
If we're saying, gee, if you didn't have that public space, okay, would you throw a couple thousand more feet back onto the high school?
It's option two.
And then what's sort of the trade-off? Because if you're saying, gee, we've never had anybody in Newmarket of 1,000 people show up, and unless it's voting day, that's a toss-up. People are gonna ask the question, do you need the public space as part of the school, or is it the school taking advantage of a public space that can be shared by the rest of the community? Which may be a great idea, but wouldn't necessarily be part of the school project.
I think wherever we went in visiting the schools, all we heard about was community access, community involvement. It was almost the first thing we heard every single place we went. Within the first 15 minutes, that's all we heard. Community space, community involvement, lock the school off here and there, public can come right in the evening. The utilization of the facility is, I think, tenfold what it was 10 or 15 years ago in communities. And I think it's what's going on today, and I think we need to keep that in the forefront of our thoughts.
Can I sort of, I don't want, without going too far off the rails here, while we're on that topic, I was thinking over the weekend, and I think the next iterations of drawings will be a new school, you know, junior, senior high school over here. And it could be 6 through 12 or 5 through 12, and that will have an impact on the scope of work you would have to do down here. We're gonna need to go through that analysis. We had 50% of the people vote for a $45 million project last time, and there may be some good merit to it, not at that price point, though. But we're gonna need to go through those iterations, and just, this is, I guess we'll call it Mike's Follies, this part of the meeting, but, and maybe I'm totally out to lunch, but that's okay. I've been accused of that before. So, the other thing, we talked about thinking out of the box here and thinking about a community solution. And we're sitting in a building that doesn't quite, you know, it's tight for the town at this point. I know the SAU office is tight. It may not be the best use for this building right here. Bear with me for a second. What if you were to take Town Hall and move it to part of the high school along with the SAU office? You keep all the stuff you've done over there. You keep your elevator, you keep your gym. It's a shared building. You'd have to build less of a newer school over here because you could utilize some of this space over here. But then you might, there's an old gym, and Mark played basketball in it, that's right behind the newer gym here. Without building a Taj Mahal of a performing arts center, maybe you can convert that into a bigger performing arts center. A place for public to have meetings. This is, I know for a fact, when the vote happened last time for the school, people just drove by here and kept going because the place was packed. I mean, you know, it's not a good place to, you know, hold public meetings, or hold votes. And this is definitely thinking out of the box, but, you know, under that sort of scenario, maybe that's the best of both worlds. The town wouldn't have to pay for a new space. The school already owns it. Maybe that older part of that building's more amenable to a renovation for offices, for town offices, versus trying to shoehorn school space into it, right? Certainly, the town and the SAU office would have more than enough storage space in that, and more than enough parking for that, and maybe you wouldn't have to build such a bigger building across the street. We're talking about flexible spaces. Maybe there's enough space here, and I'm talking high level here, that you'd have some buffer space that the town or the SAU office wouldn't utilize. So if you have that extra classroom need in a given period of time, you'd already have it there. I'm guessing that would be a cheaper renovation for a town office than for a school.
It would be.
A lot cheaper. And I don't raise that because I'm saying that that's the silver bullet to solve the whole town's problems. I think it's just sort of an interesting idea that came to mind. And of course, I think developers would jump all over buying this building if the town and the school district would have put it on the market.
Well, I thought one of the scenarios you sent us was building a middle.
It was.
Well, it was actually building you eliminated the elementary school.
Correct.
and
Yep, that's
built
another
something
option.
across that. And
So-
I don't know if we've seen that one yet.
I won't go on and on about this, but there's some appeal, it would seem, to sort of sharing services too. Sharing, one heating plant rather than having another building over here. I don't know if it bears any more thought. I'm certainly opening myself here to cross-examination or sanity.
What about the opposite? What about putting the town hall and the SAU across the street on Carpenter's, along with a performing arts center?
That's a possibility. What struck me, Skip, about this sort of arrangement that I talked about, and there may be different iterations that make more sense, was that you wouldn't lose any of the work that we've done in there. The elevator would still be put to full use. That gym, which is great, it would still be used. you'd have another gym over here for the school, but you'd have this gym, and then, but what you'd have available to yourselves is a space to make a public meeting space, but also an auditorium or a performance center. Not a grandiose, you know, massive performance center, but one that uses the existing space. Because there's a full-size gym there, there's a stage, and it's, I don't know if it's steel or stick framed in where the science rooms are right now.
I think we need to find out the usable and buildable space in the Carpenter property. That sounds like it's a larger facility that you're trying to.
I think a larger question is if you change the use of
Correct.
the school.
Education to business.
Right.
You have
What are you opening yourself up
the
for?
code.
So, you know, I mean, we've had the discussions
Yeah.
about, you know, you can do such a percentage and everything, but if you're changing the intended use, I think you're opening up a can of worms that I'm not sure we want to open. But, I mean, I understand the concept that you're talking about, but, you know, I'm looking at the plans, and I'm saying to myself, okay, you know, we can physically fit our needs in the two locations that we are. And if you want to do something across the street, save that for another day. Save it for another vote. You know, I mean, to me, I think we should be focused more on trying to solve the school issue, the facility issues, and moving that forward and getting a vote that will pass. And based on what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing, we're able to do that with the existing buildings with modifications.
It was my understanding, though, that the reason we started talking about going across the street is that there are these needs, and, you know, I've seen most of it at the elementary school, but, you know, the holiday concert for choir for the chorus down there is coming up, and I think this will be my 4th year, and I don't think any year I've actually been able to see my child or really actually hear. And it's still a lovely event, but it does point out that, you know, there is some needs, and I know that there are needs up at the junior high school. So you're able to kind of, that was the way that, you know, with those two, to kind of combine the resources of those two places and also build into some flex space for the community, which we've identified are problematic here. So, and the other thing I think that you didn't mention is parking, which is, you know, the need for parking here, the need for parking in all three locations here, there, and the elementary school. That seems to, you know, there's need for parking. I had to look for parking.
But on those plans, the parking's increased.
Substantially, yeah. Yeah.
So, you know, I'm not sure if the parking's an issue on that site.
Can we just go back?
And even if you utilize additional space on the existing high school lot, if you are in a situation where you need parking, say it's student parking, it's across the street, you have 16, 17, 18-year-olds crossing the street as opposed to 7, 8, 9-year-olds trying to cross the street. So, you know, I mean, it looks great as a parking lot right now, but it's nice to know that if you want to do something there later, or even at the same time, you know, provided the voters buy into it, you know, you've got that luxury.
To me, first off, I think the last time, the Performing Arts Center and how big this performance space is needs to be programmed, not looking at this. What is the need that you want in your school for the Performing Arts Center? The other thing, before we even look at this property, is how many new fields do we need with this high school? So we need to define those and then see how we can fit them on here. Right now, we're looking at this property to see what we can fit, but we haven't proven the need. So that's really something we need from you and the school board on what those requirements are, because this renovation doesn't have that current stage area. So if we're not doing that over here and the school stays here, we have to put it back in here. Or if we're going to look at the new town hall and some other space here, I think you're exactly right. If we put it in this, and we should look at it, Mike, it does change the code, so it's not the international existing building code, it's the international building code, because you're changing it to a business use.
Yeah, I don't want to think we're going off the rails here, because we're not. I'm just trying to think, I'm not trying to think as just a school district, but as a, you know, as living in this town, and, you know, it may take a little of this thinking out of the box, and I might be crazy, but it just seemed to make some sense, because the school's got some challenges as a school to renovate it. And maybe you wouldn't need to renovate it as much for that use.
So, the one thing we would need is the existing spaces in this building, and are these adequate or not, just like we're doing for the two schools? Do we have a listing of what the SAU and the town offices need?
But I think Mike's point is also a good one too, so that we understand, and it comes from a circle of what you said, is that if we're talking about something over here that's strictly a lawn, like a gymnasium slash, you know, auditorium, you know, or performing center, that's an addition maybe to what our real needs are here, then maybe that is something down the road, or maybe it's a second warrant article, you know? We take care of our school stuff first and make sure that you know, that passes. And that if people want to go for this, so be it. That's great. They vote for it. But at some point in time, we're going to have to, here's our program. Either we're going to have to, you know, do what we can here with the performance space, or if it can't be done, look at another option. But I guess I agree with what Mike's saying. It's what we have to be careful about what we're talking about here. If we're talking strictly something that's not absolutely program necessary, then maybe that gets either pushed down the road, or it's a second warrant article that doesn't shoot down the whole project.
On the Performance Arts Center across the street, what scale is that? I mean, is that a 350 square foot facility there?
That's 20,000.
That's 20, so my question is, could you get a 350 seat capacity theater, somehow attach it to the existing school we have now?
So in this option,
Nice
Perfect
segue.
at what if, so in this one, we left this, we're removing some of that existing
One-story.
one-story building that was just kind of your New England additions. We removed that, creating a nice courtyard here with an academic addition. This option we look at, you've got that existing, it's an old gym. Here, we're bumping out, we're gonna make this whole space the new theater within the school. So that becomes your larger theater space.
We're back to the first plan where you were showing we spent mostly on the elementary school. We're now heading over to the high school, right?
Second plan, it's elementary school without.
Yeah, no, this is the second plan.
Option 2.
Elementary school without the, using this.
Oh, okay.
So this one could be a hybrid, and I think moving forward, we investigate sixth grade down here and not having it up here. So this one can morph into multiple options.
So this might be easier with a sixth grade move down there.
Down,
Yeah.
yep.
Because you are adding more to the high school.
That's where, say, if we move sixth grade down here, we can eliminate this.
I got you.
We do an addition here, we infill with the cafeteria. We do your classrooms, but we also give yourself an enlarged theater space. So that existing theater, we just kind of push out. We make it a really nice big space so we can fit, hopefully the whole population wants to look at that, but we can fit 354, 500 people in that theater with a proper slope, everything. Within that space, we add on to the classrooms as well, and then we look at some type of space for the fitness center, getting it up out of the basement.
And health classroom.
And then that really keeps across the street for parking, and then future space if you want to do any additions there in the future. And then down at the elementary school, this looks at updating the parking, and as well as giving yourself a loop road, but without this addition. One thing it does is you've got that field that you're using right now for play space, it would eliminate that. So that becomes a problem.
So
But
there's
you're-
no playground?
That's what
There's a
is,
very little, small playground?
and you do have a playground. Essentially, we're just we're taking the road, right now the road kind of comes through here, and the playground's on this outside. This.
You also have a playground in the back.
Yeah, so right now the playground's here. We're pushing the road out and moving the playground inside the loop road. Just for kind of safety and to get that circulation.
Be on that stone wall.
And then doing some type of roughly a 10,000 square foot addition at the school, and then a new gym with a new main entrance, reworking that for security.
The green space right behind the school, right there, that space, how does that compared to, do we have something that shows with the portables on there?
So this is the existing roadway. We haven't moved that,
Right.
but
Do we have anything that shows the portables sitting there?
Right there,
portables
yeah.
right here.
So that green space is pretty much the same size?
Right.
Roughly, yeah.
Yeah, okay. And that's a garden space and that type of thing now?
Well, there's 2 portables and a garden, I think,
Mhm.
Those are coming down.
Right, I know there's portables out there, but yeah, I was just concerned about that green space.
For the aged, in the future at least, finding the actual writing that told you it was 10,000 versus 20,000 and enlarging it on the computer versus trying to use 6 micro, glass. Can we put like A and B or something like that on the
Big
pieces of additions, and then have a piece of paper that says A includes,
Sure.
in something that's readable? Because
Yeah.
the red stuff here was, even if you blew it up in the computer, it started to deteriorate before I could actually focus on it.
Okay.
Let's not focus on this age stuff so much, Russ.
I have 2015 vision, so I mean, but I
One of the
still
reasons why I did this was, we wanted it to be more about the big picture concepts, and just about big blocks of space and where we're gonna put stuff, and then we'll, so this.
Can you, in terms of the space here and bumping out a current, I guess you said there was a current performance space in there, what's the seating capacity of that model?
Right now, it's not a performance, it's your existing kind of banquet room with the stage. We would, and then you have your library kind of multimedia space. We would wipe all that out and put it back to essentially what the old gym space was, and then do tiered seating within that.
But we had a count, what was Lord's count on what that layout showed? It's approximately 350,
50, I
400,
thought, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
And just, if I could ask, do you guys have a sense as to what the need is in terms of that kind of capacity? Is 350 adequate, or?
You would do more, majority of your school, if you did a large school.
You could also seat,
I wouldn't do much more than 350, it's in the building.
you could have the bank seating for 350, but you could also seat another 50 plus down on the flat part too.
A lot better than we have now.
Right, 350 you could do your whole middle school, you could do your whole high school, you couldn't do the whole school.
You couldn't do the whole school?
No. If you wanted a large, but.
And the numbers here, at least on the previous version, had 350, my eyes aren't there yet.
600.
Neither eyes are. 6 to 650, are those like standard kind of sizes?
They were swags. We didn't know what you wanted, so, is it a town-wide thing or is it just a school thing? So, obviously, if it's in the school, we'd probably make it school appropriate, but if it's across the street, then how big do you want to go?
So you could feasibly go 500, or
Oh, yeah, that
450 or
was-
something like.
Essentially we had, on a previous project, town forum on what do they want to do for multimedia space, and we showed them 350 is 9,000 square feet, that's X amount of dollars, and we showed it what it looked like. And then when you make it bigger, the fly gets bigger, the stage gets a little bigger, it's gonna be 15,000 square feet, which is $4 million as opposed to $3 million, and those are just numbers, making them up, but, so we could show these are the options, let's talk about it. So, that's where those numbers.
Just a quick question, because on the performance center or auditorium, whatever you wish to call it, is it feasible to take our existing gym space and looking at where the players sit and everything, blowing out that wall, bringing it back 20, 30 feet, building your stage there, then you'd be able to utilize for any shows that you'd be looking at. You'd have a stage, you'd have plenty of sit-down area on the floor. You'd want to buy, you know, carpets or whatever they put down to protect the floor, and you still got all your gym seating.
We talked about that in previous discussions, not on these plans, but in previous. Reason why we never brought that forward is because your drama's not gonna be able to practice while you have basketball games and practices going on. So we'd never get it for a dual purpose. You'd only have to shut down athletics or your PE classes while you're setting up for drama productions in that dual purpose space.
They go on at the same time.
Yeah, because you'd be practicing, so like.
Okay, but
our-
practicing, you've got your existing space now, which is obviously not large enough to do any productions or
Correct.
anything, but you've got your practice space. So you couldn't utilize that for your practice and then just have that facility available for when you wanted to put the shows on or what have you?
Not the design that was demonstrated to us in previous plans.
One of the things is this is a bearing wall here, so all your structure, so if you cut a big hole in that for your proscenium, you'd need a mega steel beam. And if you tried to do it this way, you could do it, you'd be blowing out the bathrooms and redoing
Yeah.
those.
Mike, you were talking about blowing it out this way.
Right.
Yes.
Problem with that is it floods in that parking lot, and it's already built up, so it can be done, but it comes at a hefty price tag.
But it's a,
Structurally, it'd be a nightmare.
This
A
is
load
This is a
bearing,
bearing
yeah.
wall, obviously.
that's a bearing wall
Throwing
too.
an idea out.
No, it's,
Yep.
it's,
We looked at it.
there was one, what school did we see that had that?
In the cafeteria.
The Lebanon Middle School.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
That
we
was-
had a
that-
stage off the gym,
But that was built
it was brand new,
from the get-go.
right.
Mm.
It did have it, just like you described it, though, maybe just,
Mhm.
It's great space.
I think Stratum CMS,
well, I mean, the original gym had it, right? I think that's where the stage is. I mean, that was the idea, it was a gym and a stage.
I think Stratum's elementary school has a similar setup, but it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
Having done stuff there that, I mean, it took us about an hour of setup to convert a cafeteria into a performance space was, you know, it's just I mean, it's doable, but that's also an elementary school.
Right.
Yeah, it gets a little different in the high
So
school.
what's this other thing over here?
That would be an option for some type of lockers, concession, across the street. If you're gonna develop
Okay.
fields over here,
I see.
be nice, so away
Yeah.
teams could come in, drop off there, they could get dressed, go out to the game, and also spectators, they would have bathrooms right there. So smaller size space, maybe
But
just a
I
couple
also
team rooms.
think this option shows that maybe even we could look at rotating this field and moving that, so if we did not want to affect those two wetlands, we possibly could by doing two fields. But I go back again, what are the fields that are needed? So,
Well, this is another area where it would be very nice if the town actually spoke to the school. Because we have a rec department, there's a lot of land that's currently being used by the school, there's other land that has fields around. And before we just get in a narrow focus of, gee, the school would like to put another field over here, I'd like to think of a town view of what the space they utilize today.
Mike, I think is that possible to arrange some kind of joint committee meeting or to have some representatives of the town meet with some representatives of either the school board or this committee? Because I mean, I think that there's several places where there's a conversation that might be helpful, and maybe not two full committees, but
Security was one we talked about.
Well, Jim Hilton would probably be, good to talk to. He runs the rec department over here. But maybe I've got it wrong, though, but
The school board needs to speak to the town council.
I've heard from several people that, just anecdotally, people who are into athletics here, we have enough fields in town. We have enough fields. We don't need any more fields. We just, they're not right altogether, but we have enough fields. What I hear time and time again is, so we don't have enough gym space. We don't have the one gym over here, just, it's tough.
Of course, if you're gonna,
So I guess I was surprised on the outcome from the feedback from the high school, the junior, junior, senior high to hear that the fields were needed.
But if
We
you
we
put
have
in
enough
a,
fields until one needs to be rebuilt, like Nichols Ave needs to be rebuilt right now.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's gonna take that out of commission for a while. So, in the meantime, where you go?
I don't know the
Well,
answer,
no,
I just don't want a
is-
parochial decision made from one section where if we actually got the town speaking, we may make a better
Can I just
decision for the
ask, do you have a sense of what the athletic department says?
Yeah, that was recommendations, both for a soccer field and a baseball field. We only have one full-size baseball field in Newmarket, so that's for, middle school and high school baseball. Legion ball that she plays in the summertime, we only have one full-size baseball field. And then
someone
a
told me
soccer
that
field, we only have one high school soccer field. We have multiple rec soccer fields, we only have one high school soccer field. So then it becomes scheduling and then use. So you look at that, that's a JV soccer team for boys and girls, and then high school. So that's 4 teams, plus your middle school teams, that's 6 teams on a soccer field, one full-length soccer field in the whole town of Newmarket.
Someone also said to me, and I don't know whether this is true, maybe you can confirm this, that track and field practices in the parking lot?
Yeah, we do not have a track and field space, so they run around town.
So this is a good debate. I mean, we obviously need to do some more work on it. I don't want to waste Ingrid's time here with this, though, because we need to figure that out and then feed it to the architect team.
But I think some sort of meeting with the town, while I was doing some research on the zoning districts and what's permissible here, I ran into, there's a master plan that the rec department did, and there was no date on it, so I don't know how old it is.
There's a master plan for the town that has a whole bunch of parts to it.
Well, it may not hurt to ask to see if there's a win-win where you could combine a project doing part of their master plan that's.
Yeah, if you speak to the planning office, Diane, she's the town planner, and she's responsible, as is the town council, for updating the master plan. It covers a whole bunch of things, but includes that.
But we're here to school and what are your needs, so that's what we're trying to get our arms around, in terms of site stuff.
Just the taxpayer.
Those are an option.
But these are obviously drawn to scale, so
Yep.
there's a certain area that a baseball field requires.
Right.
Yeah.
The other thing, and also kind of tying with what Mike was saying, I would think during the bidding process, we could have the needs, whatever we decide for the school options to be, and then have the schools as a separate option, as an ad alternate or whatever.
Exactly.
And if it's feasible, we do it. If it's not, we cut it out.
Mhm.
I mean, that is an option.
Mhm.
Good way to show that you're kind of focusing on the needs and then so that you've done your due
Let
diligence.
people decide what the needs are and on that.
So option 3 looks at, take the existing elementary school offline, sell that, repurpose it into another use. Build a new elementary school that takes the 6th grade as well, so move them across the street. Then we do essentially what we did at option 1, build on a new science classroom addition and a new rework main entrance cafeteria. And that puts over 85,000 square feet of new space across the street. Pick up your needs. If you were to do a theater on that as well, it would be larger, it'd be more like 100,000 square foot new building across the street. So that was another option that we talked about last time about looking at what does that do. It does create a fairly large new building across the street. Then it does pick up your needs at the high school. And then what can we do with this? Is there an actual value for that school?
So does this plan, it includes the fields
Yep.
that the high school and junior high need, and then play space for the, that-
Well, I'm not sure we know the
Back in here.
buildable space yet. You start building something that large, and at best, you're gonna get one field or maybe.
Well, if we can affect the wetlands on the right, but again, it's mixing high school fields with the elementary school. Secondly, that's all 2 stories, or most of it's 2 stories, so that's why it's a much more compact building footprint.
are there, I mean, I'll ask, just for the principals, are there any concerns about having elementary students and high school students? Because I imagine that those fields would be operational during school hours.
This would be a busy little spot on school drop-off.
But the high school fields would be used after school, I'm assuming.
Right, PE fields we still use down here.
Yeah.
We wouldn't go across the street.
We go across the street.
And then we'd
But-
have playgrounds for the elementary right off the back of the,
But it would be very busy because there's no, I mean, to drop off. I mean, it would just be busy for about 2 hours.
Yeah, if
And then 2 hours in the afternoon.
Conceptually, if that is your fields and you say you do play soccer on the new site, you know, high school games start at 3:30. Elementary school's getting out at 3, so that would be a very, you know, it'd be something
Tight,
to discuss.
yeah.
It'd be traffic central right there.
And we're just, these are all, there's
We'd need
pros
a
and
light.
cons. This is conceptual, but, I mean, it does have some appeal to it on its face insofar as that you got, you know, the schools right near each other. The school can access these fields as well, vice versa. You know, it's perhaps a more expensive proposition. I mean, who knows what you could sell this for, but I mean, I guess the calculus is that if you're gonna put so much work into this and a new gym and whatnot, you know, might it make sense to spend a little bit more or a lot more? We'll have to figure that out, but to have that configuration, but it's just another iteration. It, you know, maybe if you were starting from scratch and you had carpenter to begin with, this is probably the way you'd do it, rather than having the school spread out, because then you can share parking back and forth. And you can obviously do this anyways by having nothing over here, but,
You could build either a kitchen here or here that could support both schools, so you have some efficiencies there.
right.
you could build the gym, as you were talking about, to have a performance space, just like the Lebanon Middle School at the elementary school.
Right.
You know, I just think, but that, when I see taking away that elementary school, I mean, it's 62,000 square feet, and it's built in 1987. I mean, it's an expensive move.
Well, if we can sell that for $20 million and only build a $10 million facility, I like it. I don't think it's gonna work out that way.
Are you buying?
I don't think, based on zoning and everything else, I'm not sure anybody's gonna be buying the elementary school property.
We'll throw the furniture into it.
So I guess this is the scheme we're going with.
That's good.
There's some nice wetlands area.
Skip, you wanna buy that to develop, that elementary school property?
Lot of ledge there.
There's ledge.
That one looks sandy. It's very nice.
Yeah, there is a sandy spot on the side.
This does create a really nice
Campus.
campus
Yeah.
feel, but it also comes with other.
Mm-hmm.
So what I was thinking was further developing this option with seeing what it looks like with a theater in here and how many we can develop in there. Looking at bringing the 6th grade down, further developing this with an option of having the loop road not push into the new site, and then also an option of what it looks like further developed in that new site. And then, again, doing an addition here, kind of, we're moving the 6th grade out, so we probably won't have to do this. And then doing some type of small support space across the street with some fields.
And then what about, I think we should look at Mike's idea too, of doing some sort of moving the town hall and SAU out and building a new 7 through 12.
Yeah, and that's something I just threw out there as a high-level idea, but I mean, that's a long, it's a long path to get to that point. But I mean, I think for, at least in addition to what you said, Chris, for next time around, we ought to think with a caveat of the wetlands, but to keep moving along here, to consider, discuss a new junior, senior high school over here, maybe a 5th through 12th, or a 6th through 12th, what that would mean. But another way of looking at this too is if you went that route and, you know, maybe you partially demolished this and kept your old gym, that's your performing arts center, and keep the basketball gym, that's already there. maybe you do over here what we're kind of considering high level over here. You know, you have your stage area and the gym right here with all the parking, just that, and then a new school, and maybe some of this can be sacrificed to lessen what you would need to do over there too.
So if we're building a new school on that side,
Yeah.
I'm assuming we're trying to build all of the program functions under one roof and not go back and forth?
Yes, ideally,
Okay.
yeah,
That's right.
ideally, but, you know, we talked about a community center or a performing arts center here.
Right.
Well, you already have it somewhat built, you have your gym and you have
Sure.
potential here to do this as a standalone as well.
Do we know how much square footage is in this building?
In this building?
Right.
I don't.
I have no idea.
Skip?
Because
you got
isn't
any-
this, if we sold this building,
No.
this is what we'd need to replace?
At least, yeah, I know the town
No, you
offices are
need,
tight.
right now, the town is saying, I'd sort of like my school space back because I have a floor and a half and I really need the 2.5 floors or whatever. And the school in the $45 million proposal
Ah, okay.
had the administration moving over to
It-
that as well, so.
Maybe, that flexibility to even, if you did this with a new school.
But the school would have
the
to speak
SAU
to the
office
town.
right here, so.
I didn't hear that. I didn't hear it.
The school would have to speak to the town. I mean, these are rational issues that people can get together on and share, except here.
Well, it seems like, I mean, in the room that we're sitting in too, this was designed for a meeting room slash, I mean, you could create a triple use, space that would then meet community needs, town needs, school needs.
But we need to have those iterations, I don't know if there's 3 or 4 of them, with a new, junior, senior high over here, and at the 5th through 12th, I know we talked about that, but if you moved the 5th grade up here, you wouldn't have to do as much down here. And again, it's gonna come down to a choice, is it the best thing?
But I thought 5th grade we weren't bringing up. I thought that was off the table.
Philosophically, I would move 5th grade up with 12th.
So I thought 6 was our cutoff.
Well, well, let's open it up to the group. I mean, should we consider that? I mean, at least at this stage, to bring it up, because, and I'm just speaking from a space needs point of view. If you cut the 5th out of here, you'd have to do, I would think, a lot less down here. You'd have to do some renovations in the entryway, and there may be more efficiencies to move it up. I'm not talking to the academic needs. I know, Ann, your school is again, 4th through 8th.
Yeah.
So there may be a way of doing that, and it may be that the downside of doing that ultimately takes that off the table, but you might want to look at it.
I mean, I Chris could speak to this issue more eloquently than I can, but I agree with what you're saying, and that we definitely, I would really like to see us next sort of look at a new junior, senior high school across the street. As we've said before, 50% of the voters voted for that option at a price tag that people aren't comfortable with. That's the feedback. But it was pretty popular. So I feel like that's kind of the thing we're missing here in all of these.
Okay.
In terms of configuration, and again, I don't want to speak for you, Chris, is it doable to put a 5th grade in a middle school? Sure. But I think the challenge that we run up against as we're weighing pluses and minuses is that right now, Chris is running 2 schools within a school. He's got a middle school and a high school. If you bring a 5th grade up, it's potentially looking at 3 schools within a school, and running an elementary school program, a middle school program, and a high school program all within one building. And if you've got a really dynamically planned building where, separate entrances and even separate start and end times, but then you're probably also looking at some additional, administrative costs, because you're gonna hit the ceiling of, how many classes, how many grade levels can your art teacher teach? You have one art teacher now. Too. I mean, that's one example. So you take all of that. You're probably going to need a different administrative setup, co-principals. So, again, as Mike is talking, we're talking about weighing pluses and minuses. Is that one we need to iterate out? I leave it to this group to decide, but there's some pretty significant.
I think it's a greater impact putting fifth graders in, it's definitely an elementary school model, So you're gonna run elementary, middle school, high school, and your career center all out of one building. It's actually 4 different schedules that you run.
Yeah.
We run 3 currently, and it's really difficult.
Okay.
And then you brought up the point earlier, changing in the PE room. Do you want a 10-year-old having to change in those locker rooms as well? We're not comfortable with 11-year-olds, but we'd put 10-year-olds in there. I would tell you that it would be it'd be a nightmare.
I think most times when you see a 5 through 8 middle school, it's a standalone building.
Yep.
I think it's a mistake, I think it's a mistake to, my own personal opinion, to have the 5th graders move up. But a point to be made for a new junior, senior high school across the street is that you probably have a 45 or 50-year building as opposed to a 20 to 25-year renovation. So, and time does go by quickly, and before you know it, you're facing another issue, another major issue. So there's something to be said for having a brand-new building, well-planned, well-built, and but especially well-planned. And so.
There's also again, there's pros and con list. I mean, if you did a new building over here, you wouldn't have the 2 or 3 year disruption.
True.
Over here, while it's going on. I mean, just doing that elevator this summer was a mess, and that's just a shaft. They did some other work around here, but, I mean, these are considerations, and we talked about life cycle. I think that's what Skip's getting at, Do you build, do you do a $5 project that's gonna last, 25 years, or do you do an $8 project that's gonna last 50?
And your equipment is so important in these big buildings. The life of the equipment, and the ability to have in a new structure the latest in technology and equipment, I think is important. I think it's harder to mix that into a renovation, although certainly not impossible. And there's more than one way to skin that cat. We saw up in Stevens where they went outside for that, for their equipment. So, there's a lot of things to think about that, but.
Yeah.
But really, if you're making that payment every year, and you got a 50-year building, feels pretty good, probably.
So, let's, for now, because I'm hearing no good things about bringing 5th grade up. That's okay, that's part of this process, because people will have those questions down the road. It's a good thing that we record them, that it doesn't fly. We need to keep doing this. So that's good. So let's maybe an iteration with 6 through 12, and one with 6 through 12, and maybe one with 7 through 12, bringing 6 down. And then,
Develop that.
yeah, I mean, SAU office, keep the gym. We don't want to, I think the town is sensitive to throwing away work that's already been done. I don't think
Right.
you would do that if you kept, the stage and the gym with the elevator would still be useful. And then, and there's more than enough space over there, at least for the SAU office. And maybe we do have to have that conversation with the town. Maybe their 50-year plan says, SAU, if you get out of the top floor, will be good. That's enough space for us, for the foreseeable future.
I think that the plan of bringing the 6th grade down and maximizing that elementary school site, and I still see space for future classrooms there, should there be a a bubble or an issue. I think it's just a great utilization of that site, because as Russ pointed out, I certainly am not interested in buying it and developing it if it was for sale, because it's not gonna bring any money back to the school.
And we have the Black Bear TIF ready that we can.
We certainly do.
I think the blue sky is great. Is there a way, and I don't want to end up saying numbers, because I know you have to do a lot more, but you guys are professionals, and as you're putting these pieces together, my guess is you can easily say, if this thing was 1X, then what we're changing this to is 3X.
Correct.
Guess what X is, but it's 3 times.
The one thing we need to do is get the program set so that it's apples to apples in each one. So performing arts and how big it is, what that needs to be, and getting all these correct by the next meeting. Then we can do the cost exercise.
Well, and if I put my business hat on, which I'm not sure we're supposed to do, I'd say if you're doing this all for the wonderful flat price that you said, let's get to conceptual designs, I think we can go forever in being
Right.
able. But my hope was to sort of say, some of these ideas, even if you can't put a price tag on, if you can say, 3 buildings is 4X, and keeping the 2 buildings is 1X, as we're talking through this, it will just give us some size difference. I appreciate Mike saying 50% of the people voted for $45 million last time. Not so sure if they would again. But we have all kinds of opinions here, and I just need to sort of put the arms around it and bring it into some place that we can.
That's a fair point, Russ, and I didn't mean to say that by any stretch of the imagination that we're on a $45 million path again. By no means are we. But again, I don't know if I said it at this meeting or some other meeting, but I said it recently. Take a look at the, it's almost like a list of comparables. Take a look at the architect proposals that are up on the website. It shows you the square footage and the prices, and not only Ingrid's projects, but other architects. And it sort of gives you and these are all in New Hampshire, sort of gives you a feel for what you get for the money. It tells you the price of the project, the square footage, new, reno. I was, I guess pleasantly surprised when I looked at all those compared to what we were looking at last time here,
We won't be in those clouds.
No,
I agree with you 100%.
Yeah.
It's sort of like looking through a real estate magazine. You kind of, after you flip through all the pages, you kind of figure out what you can get for what, So that was helpful. So what, are we clear enough for you for the next time?
Yep.
So, no fifth grade stays right where it is, and sixth grade may go down.
So before I think we get to that cost discussion.
Yep.
I think we need to nail down all of our options and have them on whatever A, B, C, D, E, and include this new option of the new school across, to make sure that we have everything covered, and then I think we need to do the costs.
So,
Well, it
just,
sounds like that when we began this meeting talking about the needs from the school, and both principals have agreed that they just got this, and that, and so I think that, I feel like the process is actually doing what it is, and that we're whittling down, and we're getting more and more conscientious about what the needs are, and be something that's much more substantial that you guys can work with rather than theoretical.
Right.
So I feel like
Yeah.
I feel that we're moving in the direction that we're supposed to be.
I think so too, and I'll say, maybe it's obvious, but this is an uncomfortable land to be in, just generally speaking, such high level. This isn't my comfort zone. I like to get down to brass tacks. But we need to do this, because at the end of the day, whatever option we're gonna go with, we're gonna have to explain persuasively why we didn't go with that other option, given that split vote, right? And so, whether it's new or an ad reno or combination or whatever, it's not just finding in our own minds what we think the best solution is. We need to explain chapter and verse why the others don't make sense, because those questions are coming.
Well, I think, Mike, that if, once we get to the point of maybe some budget numbers, if we can get our arms around the programs, the 2 programs that we're looking at here, we're not very far away from some budget numbers, and I think those budget numbers will speak loudly to the choices that we've been whittling down and trying to make. So, and that's not far away, and as I see it, and still gives us plenty of time to be moving along, because we are making some good progress, I think.
And just, if I can dovetail on that, we had last on our agenda, and I'm not gonna get into a discussion of it right now. I wanna be humane and let you guys get back before midnight. But, the last thing we talked about, the school board brought it up at their last meeting, was, and we talked about this with several of the architects we interviewed, is having a warrant article, because it doesn't appear at this point that we're ready, both substantively and politically, to propose a project this March. But we may be far enough along to propose, and just let me back up, so people can understand. There's 2 ways to do this, essentially. You can propose a warrant article for the project, you know, X amount for a school, a new school, or an ad reno, whatever it is. Or, and then if that's approved, then the architect team does the finished build drawings, which is really the bulk of their work. This tells you which way the doors swing and what door handles you're gonna use, and that's a ton of work. And so if that happens, if you get your project approved in March, it will take the architect team and engineers all summer to draw up finished build drawings, okay? And then you would go out to bid in the winter, and start, probably, if everything goes right, you'd break ground that next spring. The alternative to that, if you're not ready to put a full project on for a vote, is to put a warrant article on for the design fee, so you can keep going. So you figure out what your project's gonna be, and you put a warrant article out for the price of those design fees, which is the major portion of the expense. And so if that were done in March and it's approved, we could keep going. And actually, you know, the leap of faith there is in us. It's in the school board, it's us, it's in the Banwell team that we come up with the right, passable, the best project. That's the leap of faith. But if that happens, and other architects have done it this way with success, we heard during the interview process, then your drawings are done, say, next summer. You know, you can pin down more precisely what your costs are, because you know exactly what you're gonna be building. It's easier to show the public precisely what you're gonna be building. But also, if the project's approved in March of 2017, your drawings are pretty much already done. You can go out to bid right away and get going. So it's a time saver. But you know, the $1 million question is, you know, is the public convinced that what you're gonna spend money, a large amount of money to design is what they want? And here's the thing, I have a lot of confidence in this group. I think the school board, I have a lot of confidence in the administrators, the school board, in this group. I think it makes sense. And what's the downside? If it doesn't pass, it doesn't pass. We're right where we are anyways, you know? So, but I think it's worth a shot, and, you know, to look at that. We gotta do it quick, though, because we gotta,
Is that bondable, by the way?
yes.
So, you would consider having a bond issued for, I don't know, what are you thinking of? I heard talk on the
that's-
school board of
yeah.
like $1 million to $2 million or something like that.
Well, that's the magic question, and it's a tough one for us, and it's a tough one for Ingrid, because we don't know if it's gonna be an ad reno or a new, right? And so the different fees for different ones. From my perspective, from my sort of negotiator perspective, is that there's a little risk on both sides in doing that, right? And maybe the risk reflects itself, and I don't know, I don't like the word discount, but maybe an appropriate price that both sides win. In other words, if it passes, the Banwell team gets paid. They guaranteed the payment for the large chunk of their services, right? Okay? Otherwise, if it doesn't pass, and we go through this process, and we go for a project vote, and that doesn't pass, well, Banwell's waiting around for the next vote, or the next vote, or the next vote. So they don't know if it'll ever pass. And so they, there's a risk there that they may never make their fee. And so there's a compromise to be made, but we need to think about that. That's why I kind of brought it up. We need to think about, I'm gonna talk to Ingrid more about how we might wanna structure that. It may be alternate fees depending on which project you ultimately go with, or in addition to the fee that would cover the next 12 months, something like that. What it appeals to me, it appeals to the board, is that we keep going. What I fear is that we do all this process, and, we wrap up here, all we can do here in the next 2 or 3 months, and then there's sort of a lull, and there's a waste of time there. So that's the concept. Let's talk about it more next time, because I wanna let them go, but give it some
Can I just
thought. Yeah.
follow up?
Yeah.
What's the time frame for doing something like that? What are our deadlines? How much time do we have to go forward?
We would have to get the warrant article
In January.
in January,
15th or so.
yeah. So we'd have to move on it.
The biggest benefit of doing it that way, other than the time savings, is that when you go to the bond vote in 2017, you're going to have the actual price, because it will be bid out, and you'll have it down to the penny of what it's going to cost. Where most bond votes, you do $20,000, $30,000 worth of work and stick a very conceptual drawing like this with a pretty picture, and it's a guesstimate of a cost.
And I think, given the maturity of the process in this town, I think there might be some appeal to that, I mean, we
I would agree.
Something for you guys
Yeah.
to think about, and I don't know if you have the answers, or you want to discuss it tonight, but, bonding versus having it as a one-shot expense. So we talked about tax rate impact. So if you're at $1 million to $2 million out of pocket for a year, you're raising the tax rate $2. It may disappear the next year, it may go up a lot more the next year. The second one is you're sort of talking at the moment, like whatever we vote for will be spent on architectural fees. That's a contractual amount. Where we've already spent, I'll be conservative and say only $1 million on previous plans that nothing happened on. You have that in the town to think about, because we've done this twice already. And so I'd like to think of, if we're gonna have a warrant article, that we're talking about trust in the school and the school facilities committee, et cetera, that here is money if you want to move forward judiciously in being able to get the designs. It's not, here's the money, give all the money to the architects to design plans for the next 3 months, 6 months, or a year. It's money that's gone. And when I heard the school board discussion, I thought what we're trying to do is to say, which I understand, and I can say it puts you a year ahead, or it gets you a much closer accurate if you work this process during the year, and I think it's interesting. But I also heard the school board saying, well, if we don't need the money, we're not gonna use it, or if we can get 1 or 2 designs that don't cost 4 or 5 designs, we'll go down that path and try to frugally spend the money. So I didn't hear that as part of it. I was hearing that this would just all be architectural fees.
Yeah, that's my understanding, Russ, is that the warrant article would be just for architectural fees for final drawings. It's not, here's an ad reno, here's a new. It's, whatever it is, we're gonna go with for a project vote in 2017, because you couldn't feasibly do that. I mean, it'd be hugely expensive to do multiple.
I think the difference, what it would entail, is if it did pass in March, we would have to get the public involved and have many public forums to keep them apprised of this committee's work and not just through this meeting, but go out and have Saturday forums so people can come and have their input as we go through this process, rather than just having 1 or 2 public forums like the normal pre-bond does. It'd be maybe once every 2 months, we'd get out and invite people in.
Yeah, and I don't mean to hold up, but to me, it's important only to say that if what you're saying is the facility committee comes down to, let's say, 2 or 3 options, and we start to vet this with the public, as we talked about, and get their input, and we still haven't spent, you know,
Right.
that 2 million
Gotcha.
yet, because we're waiting to get the public input saying, gee, everybody now is on the same page. This is the one option we want to move forward with. Let's go gangbusters and do the plan. Then we're not spending that money until we go through that
Right.
buy-in process of the public.
Yep.
Rather than, and
Yeah.
if that's the concept, I think that one's a lot easier to people to digest.
Yep.
That you're not gonna spend the money until you get public comment, and the money may not be spent till the summer in designing the
Right.
plans, but just there'll be,
That's an
it's a much
excellent,
better story than.
that's an excellent point, Russ, and that's the one that sticks, that's like the million-dollar question in my mind on this whole thing, is that how do you get people to the point where they have enough confidence that you're not gonna go off the rails? And I don't think this group speaks like that, you know, so I think there's some confidence inherent already, but I think it's gonna be a heck of a push to get that approved between now and March. I mean, I think we're heading in the right direction, but it's gotta be a lot of public input, because I wouldn't never want it to be a situation where the public really doesn't have any idea what the direction's gonna be, and they just think they're voting for, a large fee, and they don't know what it's gonna entail. They don't know
Or
what
if they feel that the trigger's not gonna be pulled on the fee unless there's some general consensus, you know, through the dialogue process, that there's a solution here and just not another.
Maybe that works its way into the wording of the warrant article. That's a delicate balance too, without making it too complicated, but that's a fair point.
This is a great discussion, but I would really love if we could put it on the table till next week, when
Hang on,
probably have a
except
little
one
more
fun question.
clarity
Now,
than I
when
do
you're
right
gonna
now.
go back, and you're talking about 6 through 12 on
On
the
the new.
Carpenter property.
Right.
What type of number for students are you gonna be using? Are you 500, 550, and then,
It would be the same as these options plus the 6th grade up at that school. So I want to say right around 550.
500, but yeah, 550.
Yeah. Is that the number you were thinking?
yeah, just,
Part of it's once we get, say after next meeting, and we have, say, 2 options that we want to move forward with, we do a public forum on a Saturday morning in December, January. Just get it out there. So, and have our first review.
Not a bad thought.
Yeah,
It's
December's not gonna happen.
It's
but
not, no,
January's
yeah, maybe January, it's not a bad thought, but I'm almost think we need to, I don't know, I'm just throwing it out there, but I think we probably need a little bit of meat on the bones in terms of costs, you know, in terms of, rather than mere concepts, if they're.
There's 2 ways of thinking about that, because if you don't show the cost at the first one, then they concentrate on the program elements and what's right for the school, and they don't get jaded by what
That's
the
true.
cost is,
Mhm.
so.
Well, and I think I like, cost is gonna be a huge consideration, no matter what. But I think that taking a moment to consider programmatic goals, community goals, that deserves that conversation and that focus without the cost. And then bringing those things in. I tend to like that particular model, that cost is gonna be there whether we like it or not, but just to have one space.
If you go through that process, that program analysis will justify the cost to the public. So it'll defend itself once you get there. But say if you came to the table right away with the cost and the 2 options, then it's
Steak, I think.
it's less meat on it.
They're going to want the cost, but they just have to be patient.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. Got some of that, Patsy?